everyday people, they're busy watching these shows that majority of them are showing, we caught the killer, we caught the person, and they're behind bars. And then everybody, they watch the show and it's horrible what happened. It's gruesome. And somebody died, but they caught the killer. Okay, good. That's a good story. Good night. I'm going to rest sadly knowing our criminal justice system gets it right every time they're going to catch the guy. That is so far from the truth. You hear that a lot where somebody comes on a scene and, they're panicking and they're trying to guess like what happened. The assumption that the person makes on that 911 call, whether it's a true assumption or not, it'll come back to bite you for sure, because they're listening to see, are you trying to already stage an alternative situation as far as, what happened to her? You're already down this path of like creating this fabrication.
And he goes ahead and he says, look, I'm holding off the other detectives from hurting you. They want to hurt you for what you did. Tell them something and you can go home. Just tell them something so I can get you out of here.
Go home.
So
go home. Famous last words.
So he said, so I tell them based on all the things that they had said, I kind of knew what happened. And I tell them.
What ended up happening?
They charged him. Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with Fatima Silva. Probably said it wrong. And she's a defense attorney and the co-host of the, I think, A&E TV show, which is called Reasonable Doubt. And I believe it was on for, 8 or 9 years. So we'll find out in a second. So I appreciate you guys watching, and check out the interview. You're a criminal defense attorney.
Yes, few things. You actually got my name right. So it is Fatima Silva. Kudos on that. But the show is on ID channel. That was originally what it was on, Discovery. And now you can find it on Max. Which is
it's not on A&E?
Yeah. No, A&E was my partner's former show. So my partner, Chris Anderson, he was on the first 48, and that was A&E. But it's all owned by Discovery, which is now all owned by Warner Brothers. So you could basically find us on Max now.
Okay.
Yeah. And it ran for 5 seasons.
Oh, 5 seasons? All right.
Mm-hmm.
And this was it was like canceled last season or something, or they just didn't?
It was just canceled. They didn't renew it last year. Warner Brothers took over, and a lot of things have changed. And our show, nothing against ID channel or anything like that, but it's a great channel. They had our show for 5 years, but if you do go to the network and you watch a lot of their shows, you'll find it, a lot of shows like Neighbors Who Kill or Wives with Knives, a lot more salacious stories.
Right.
Our show was not like that at all. Our show was a mission driven true justice show about wrongful convictions and looking into wrongful convictions. So we don't really have too much of that, and I think that we have an incredible fan base, and a lot of people want to see the show back on a network. We have been, on different networks, including Oprah's network. It's just a different kind of show. It's something you wouldn't normally see. You're getting together a criminal defense attorney, which is what I do. I've been doing that for over a decade. And my partner, Chris Anderson, the amazing Chris Anderson, who is a former homicide detective. He was on the first 48 for many years from Birmingham, Alabama. And then they got him on this show. And so together we have to look into these. It could be an old case or a new case, but families are reaching out to us and they're saying, my loved one was wrongfully convicted of murder. Here's why. And a lot of people say that, right? And a lot of people believe it. They absolutely believe it. You want to believe your loved one. I mean, let's say it's your father. Let's say it's your spouse, and you're going to bed every night not knowing anything they're doing. I mean, gosh, that's a lot of these serial killers and night stalker, like all these people who were married and just went home and went to bed, and the wife had no idea. So naturally, a lot of these people believe in their family's case. And so at first, we always go in with an open mind, and we look at, okay, but give us the evidence that you're looking at. Why do you feel it's a wrongful conviction? We know. And so throughout the years, obviously, we've had hundreds of submissions. We could only take 10 cases a season. And so we would look at what are the reasons. If the reasons were pretty legit, if something seemed fishy, we would always do a FOIA request or get all the information directly from the courts, not just the family. But if there was something there, our producers would give it to Chris and I, and then we'd go and take a second look. We'd go to that state. We traveled for every single episode, and we'd meet with the family and we'd dig into the case. And so, but ultimately, it's a homicide detective and a criminal defense attorney having to have a meeting of the minds, right? So if you can imagine, and it was just me and another criminal defense attorney, or just me, I'd be wanting to look into every case. I'd say, you know what? We think your loved one's wrongfully convicted. Absolutely. We're going to provide you that private investigator. Normally what we would do is provide them an appeals attorney, private investigator. I would have been wanting to help everyone. That was my problem. I wanted to help everyone. And then Chris would probably err on the side of, nah, they're guilty. So what you have is us having to come together. We're looking at the evidence together. Sometimes we're duking it out. Brotherly and sisterly love, though, because I really respect what he does, and we have an incredible relationship and respect for one another's professions. And I would say a lot of the times we were in agreement. There were some times I would get in some good fights and I'd get up and walk away and slam a door and, try to get the producers on my side. But I'd say most of the time, Chris was very reasonable, and he could see, listen, he's able to say, as a police officer for many years, and still now chief of police and still, in law enforcement, I love that he's able to say, no, the police did something wrong here. This investigation is screwed up. And, I may not know if this person's wrongfully convicted, but their case needs a second look. And so that's, I think, why the show worked really well. But it is for true justice warriors, really. It's not for people who just want to turn on true crime and use it for entertainment purposes. That's not what we're about. These are real life jobs.
Right. I mean, I was going to say that's, that seems like a tough show for a producer, because at least in cold case files, by the time the cold case file people show up, those producers, it's already resolved. Like, you guys go through an entire investigation, and in the end, even if you lean one way or the other, it's still not really resolved. Does that make sense?
And that's what drove people. I mean, I'll be super transparent. Our fans, they love us. They love the show, and our true fans, they've been following us for years. But there were a lot of people, and you get comments like, what is the outcome of this? Like, what happened? Because we would just say at the end, Chris and Fatima provided a private investigator. And it depends on what the issue was, right? If the issue was something with the trial and needing to get an appeals lawyer, we would provide that. If the issue was gathering more evidence and still doing interviews, we would provide a private investigator. But at the end, can you imagine you've gone on this wild roller coaster ride and you find out this person may be innocent, and then at the very end, you're not told if they get out of jail? Well, that's our criminal justice system. Unfortunately, it's very slow. And I can tell you right now, the exciting thing is out of 5 seasons, 10 a season, we obviously didn't help everyone. There were times Chris and I had to sit across from families. And as a criminal defense attorney, I hated this part, but I would say, we can't provide you help. We think the only help. Good. It doesn't look good. And I would leave, if we felt like the person really did it, that was Chris's job. He would say, this person is where they belong. And he would rarely say that, because he's just filled with so much empathy and compassion for people that he understands how hard that is to hear. So the way we would frame it is, I think this is going to be an uphill battle for you every year. And the more you invest, the more you mortgage your house, the more you continue to just not go out and live your life, the more you're gonna find that you're gonna be disappointed, because there's nothing that's going to overturn this conviction. It's going to be very difficult. And that's kind of the way we would say they might be guilty. I would never feel comfortable saying somebody really did it. There were maybe a few that I agreed with Chris. Yeah, they did it. But that's not something I was comfortable with. But yeah, it's tough, because out of the people we did help, let's say anywhere from 3 to 4 a season, you're not getting the update immediately. And so people naturally, we all want resolve. We all want closure, right? We're watching a show. We want to see, what's the outcome? Did the person do it? Our show is a journey. And we are hoping and trying to pitch an update episode with ID Channel, with Discovery, because we have so many updates. We have so many of these folks out. I'd say not even a quarter, more than a quarter of the people are out of jail now. They either got released on early parole suddenly, convictions have been overturned, they're getting a new trial, so suddenly, they're released home. And so we do have a lot of updates for people. We try to update people on our Instagrams. But I could say that is tough when you're watching a show and you don't know the outcome. But that is the purpose of our show, to really draw back the curtains and show everyone this is our criminal justice system. And guess what? If you're innocent and if somebody else is coming forward and they're saying, hey, I did it, see you 5 years down the line still in jail, because that's the way our system's set up. Innocent or not, they like finality. That's what the court likes. So now at that trial phase, everybody thinks innocent until proven guilty. Yeah, you're given that one shot. And even then, is it really innocent until proven guilty? Come on. But now you get to the appeals phase. Guess what? That burden completely shifts. Now it's guilty until you can prove you're innocent. Not maybe innocent. Not maybe somebody else did it. Not, that you may have an outlet. You have to prove your innocence.
But did everyone that you took the case or you did an investigation into, did every one of those people go to trial, or did some of those people plead guilty?
Honestly, I think there was one or two where they pled, because we didn't really want to work with cases where there was a plea. It just makes it difficult for Chris and I to evaluate all the evidence, right? No evidence was really presented. And so now we just have your side of the story, which we understand there was one case where it felt like he was railroaded. And I think, I do want to say he might have had a trial first, and then he ended up pleading after. That trial may have been a hung jury. I can't remember. But there was one case I remember where he pled, and we took it because we felt like he was totally railroaded.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you were saying like the whole innocent till proven guilty. I had a friend in prison, and he went to trial. And during, I think it's voir dire, right, when
the questioning.
Yeah, they're questioning, and they're asking, do you think that you can find his lawyer said, do you think you can find him, not guilty, or whatever, keep an open mind, whatever it was, keep an open mind, I guess. You keep an open mind. And the guy goes, well, he was convicted of 47 counts of fraud. He did something.
Oh, you mean charged?
Yes, he was charged. Sorry. He was charged with 47 or whatever it was, 25 or 45, and they were like, yeah, all right.
Get him off the jury. Get him off the jury. That's what the majority of people believe.
Right. He just said what everybody else was thinking. He was the only one who was honest enough to go, I don't think so. I mean, something's wrong. Right. First of all, he's sitting at the defendant's table. That already doesn't look good. You know what I mean? So it really, and I like how you said that, like everybody else was thinking it, but nobody says it. So, the fact that he said it is great, because you can strike that person, right? They have a bias coming in. You're supposed to go in with an open mind and completely innocent until proven guilty. But we do know everybody else is thinking that. We know majority of citizens think that when they're watching these shows, and when somebody is, nowadays we have so much trial by media. If you're in the media and you are, everybody's saying, oh, they did it. You don't even know all the evidence, but do you need it? You're already deciding, well, they probably did it. And that's what I encounter all the time with folks. And that's why I love shows like ours, because people just the story can fit so perfectly. You're like, who else would have done it? That person was the only person there, the only person with the motive. And then all this other evidence comes in. And then later you find out there was somebody else. I love those stories where it's like, no, it was a random person off the street. And people are like, oh, it wasn't the husband? Like, because that's what people automatically go to. And although the statistics may show that that's likely the case, it's oftentimes when a woman's murdered, it's somebody she knows, somebody closer, and all of that. That does not mean you just take each defendant and go, well, statistics show every person has the right to that benefit of innocent until proven guilty. I forget the guy I interviewed the other day who went to trial and was found guilty. Gosh, what was his name? Russ. It was Russ something. Anyway, they did a movie about his case on, was it Netflix? Anyway, it was I think it was called, I know many good.
We won't hold you to details, Matt.
It was called like the thing about Mary or the thing about Pam. Did you see that?
Oh yeah.
I interviewed the guy. I think his name was Russ.
Oh,
really nice guy.
Yeah.
But it was so funny because, he said, "No, listen, the husband that they found guilty." He's like, "I mean, I came home and she'd been stabbed to death." He's like, "And I did." He's like, "I did say, his biggest mistake. Well, not his biggest mistake, but one of his mistakes was, he said she tried to commit or she committed suicide." He's like, "I didn't notice that, He's like, "I didn't notice that she's been stabbed a bunch of times." He's like, there was just a lot of blood, and there was there was a knife sticking out of her neck." He said, "But for some reason, I just thought, she could have just stabbed herself a bunch of times." He's like, I don't know. I was in a panic."
Oh,
they were just trying to get them there.
Tough.
Right. So then, of course, by the time they show up, it's done. They're already talking in the front yard like, "Oh, never thought my first homicide case would be this easy. What a slam dunk." Like they've already decided.
I mean, you hear that a lot where somebody comes on a scene and, they're panicking and they're trying to guess like what happened. And anytime you hear, and that's happened in one of our cases, the guy says she must have been, she must have been cleaning the gun and it went off, right? Yeah. The assumption that the person makes on that 911 call, whether it's a true assumption or not, it'll come back to bite you for sure, because they're listening to see, are you trying to already stage an alternative, situation as far as, what happened to her? You're already down this path of like creating this fabrication when really he might have just been panicking, but I don't know how you think someone's just gonna.
Yeah,
most people don't kill.
But I mean, he didn't do it. Like they've already
He didn't do it, right? I know the case.
They indicted. By the way, they indicted Pam.
Yeah.
They indicted her.
Yeah.
Well, she was found guilty on another charge. Mm-hmm. She went to hire somebody.
That case is wild.
Listen, the more he talked, and of course I saw the show. I saw the show afterwards. I said, "Listen, we got to watch the show." And so afterwards, I was like, "I should have watched this beforehand." Like, come on. Yeah. Oh, it had so many more.
Right now, you're telling me you got to interview him, and I'm thinking, oh, I would have loved that.
Listen, but here's the thing: he was a great storyteller. Great story. Like
we'll have to get him on ours.
Yeah, he was really good. I was gonna say I have another guy named Wade who actually runs a YouTube channel called Crime and Entertainment, and it's funny. So he contacted me and was like, "Hey, I would really love for you to come on my channel." And, he was like, "Hey, look," and I'll be honest with you, man. He said, "I just started it. I got like 1,000, 2,000 subscribers." He's like, "I just started, but I love your story. And I've been reaching out to people." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Well, I don't care. Sure. No problem. I got some time." So I did it, a few days later. And so 6 months went by and he called me, sent me a text and was like, "Hey, can I talk to you on the phone for a minute?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he said, "So I didn't want to say this before, but," he said, "I had something happen and it's basically wrapped up now and I'd like to come on your show." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "Well, the quick version is he and his wife split up. She started dating someone else. He and his wife started seeing each other again, right? Like they decided to make it a go of it. His wife tells the other guy, 'Look, I'm going to get back together. I got a couple kids with this guy. We had a bad patch. I realize I'm still very much in love with him. I'm getting back together with him. I'm sorry." Well, the guy's basically going around telling people, "I'm going to kill this guy." So at some point, a buddy of his, they're all kind of a circle of friends, right? Loose-knit friends. But a buddy, they were together and they were kind of drinking. And he calls him up and says, "Listen, man, I've been talking to him. Like, he just wants to talk to you." And so Wade says, "I mean, I'll talk to him. That's fine." So Wade goes over to his house. He's like, it's common ground. It's kind of neutral ground. And he goes, "We had some beers," and he had some basic questions. He said it was like, "Look, how long's this been going on? Just want to know, like, was she seeing you behind my back? Like I thought it was over. He really liked his wife." He's like, "I felt bad for him." So I told him I told him what he wanted to hear. Obviously it's like, "No, we just started talking."
Yeah.
Right. It hasn't been happening. So, and keep in mind, this is still my wife. Like, this is my wife, Yeah,
Crazy, yeah.
It's a weird situation. But he said he said, we were okay. He said, but we've been drinking. And so Wade said he went and took him to his house or something along those lines. He was supposed to drop him off at his house. They went by his house for some reason. The guy was like, he didn't want to go home. Let's stop at your house. Let's have some beer, something like that. He's like, okay, whatever. So they go to his house. We have some more beers. And he said the guy at one point, and keep in mind, Wade has a concealed weapons permit and a concealed weapon. And he said, and the guy knew it because I'd showed it to him earlier. He said, we had a conversation about it. So the guy had just gotten out of the military, whatever. He said, we're sitting there talking and we're joking around. He's like, well, we were laughing and having like just perfectly great conversation. He said, all of a sudden he gets this look on his face. And he tells him, he's like, I'm going to kill you. And he's like,
oh,
what? And he goes, I'm going to kill you. And he goes, and I mean, he just attacked me. Well, first the guy, he said he went to the bathroom, came back and he's like, so when he came back, he said he just looked at him and went, I'm going to kill you. And he went, what? And he said, the guy just charged me. So we're struggling. We're not really fighting. We're struggling. He did swing on me a couple times, punched him in the back of the head. And Wade said at some point, he's bigger than Wade. He was bigger than me. At some point, he said, they're kind of grappling back and forth. And I kind of held him for just a second. And I was like, you need to calm down. He's like, I have a gun on me. And he's like, now he's afraid he goes, now he may go for the gun. Like, I don't know, like, hey, I have a gun on me. Like, if you don't back off, like, you're going to get shot. Mm-hmm. And he said they pushed him back again. Guy charged him again, pushed him back again. He's like, pushed him back again. I said, man, I'm not fucking around. He's like, do not. And he goes, the guy came at me again. He said, I pulled the gun, boom, I shot him. Shooting him. He said, I thought I shot him twice, but I shot him 3 times. Well, when he called 911, he was like, he was still alive. I was like, hey, listen, I just shot this guy in my house. And they go, is he alive? He's still alive. He's making noise. He's laying on the ground. You got to come. But one of the things they said in his case was he wasn't upset enough. Like, I'm drunk and I don't know this guy and I'm not really all that upset. I don't feel like I've done anything wrong.
You just got attacked.
Right. So I always hear these people like, he was too upset. No, he wasn't upset enough. Apparently, there's a proper amount of upsetness that you have to be to pass the smell test. Like, I don't know.
I'll tell that to people. Most of our cases that we would handle, there was always an opinion if there was a 911 call or if, the cops, when, they encountered the person afterward, they were driving them to the station for an interview, but their behavior in the car, they just seemed relaxed. They didn't ask any questions about whether the person had passed away or not. I mean, there was so much critique, so much emphasis on how they reacted to a situation, because as human beings, we tend to think the only way we look at a situation is how can we relate to it? How would I behave? How would I react? And it's such a problem in criminal cases because you're always, and juries do the same thing. Well, I would not have acted that way. Have you been in that situation?
Right.
And even if you have, you're not the same person, right? So if I'm in an argument with my husband, how we fight is going to be different how you and your wife fight. It's just that everybody is different. Everyone reacts differently. And so this idea that everyone should be uniform in how we react to a situation of finding our spouse shot or anything like that, it's really unfair. And it does play a big role in whether somebody's charged and whether somebody's convicted. And it's the same thing with a jury watching a defendant and their demeanor in court and how they react to, when they put up the photos of the victim and it was so gruesome what had happened to the victim. That person didn't cry. They didn't shed a tear. Guess what? As a defense attorney, I'm sitting there going, do not display any emotion. Because if you start crying, that's fake. That was fabricated.
Or that's guilt. He's crying out guilt. She's
guilt,
right.
No. And so it's like you're defend if you do, right? If he was just so emotional, people would say, why was that guy emotional? I mean, another guy tried to attack him, right? Self-defense. If you're not emotional, you're a killer. It's like, it's really tough. What ended up happening?
They charged him. They charged him. He went to jail. He luckily, and listen, this is for sure. You know this. Luckily, he had like $100,000 in his 401k, and he was able to bond out and get a decent attorney. Yeah. And eventually, the district attorney changed after about 2 years, and they presented. And so the new district attorney, his attorney went to him and said, I want to show you the evidence that we have. And he goes, it was a big risk. He's like, this is a state, this was in like South Carolina, like there's a castle law, stand your ground, all of that. He's like, this guy's in his house. But the evidence, the investigation that the state had done was there was no signs of a struggle. He said, but we got the body camera from the videos. You could see a glass on the ground. You could see things knocked over. You could see all this stuff, but yet the report said there was
report said no sign of a struggle.
Oh, no, of course, no, there's none. And then he wasn't upset, and they had all these things that were just completely incorrect. They were saying that they believed he might have even been kind of executed because of the trajectory of the bullet. Well, the guy was running forward. They were saying, look, he was bent over. So he wasn't, they weren't like this, they think he was maybe on his knees or bent over, and he shot him while he was on his knees or executed. Like, no.
We have that in the case too.
Right.
We have that where a whole jury, they presented to an entire jury. Look, they were standing over them. And then later, and the jury convicted that person. And later it was the person was coming toward them. And so you're going to have different bullet trajectory. The assumptions that are made are so scary.
Well, luckily they had an independent forensic, examiner come in. Yeah. Luckily he had enough money to do that. So when they presented the case, we showed them our case, their case. Here's what's going on. This is a problem. And he said, keep in mind too, it's like they didn't even want to go to trial. Like they kept putting it off. It's years, and they haven't dropped the charges, but they also haven't brought me to trial. So anyway, after about 2 weeks, his attorney called him up and said, hey, you're a free man. They dropped the charges.
Great.
It's over.
Yeah.
Done. So he got
one. They had to do a proper investigation, but 2 years, yeah, that's a long time.
Well, here's the thing, like, had he not had $100,000,
right, he would have been in. He would have felt. He wouldn't have been able to, meet with as many attorneys. He wouldn't have had the finances to have an independent forensic. A lot of times, if you go with the public defender has to ask the court, this is what we need, and resources are very scarce, and so you're not going to get the greatest experts. And a case can absolutely come down to experts who can have the best experts. It means. And financial means, it makes a huge difference in criminal court, sadly.
Yeah, listen, guys. I'm sure you
wild case. We've seen some wild stuff on our show. You would love. It's just it blows people's minds, and I think there's such a trust of our criminal justice system. I think everyday people, they're busy watching these shows that majority of them are showing, we caught the killer, we caught the person, and they're behind bars. And then everybody, they watch the show, and it's horrible what happened, it's gruesome, and somebody died, but they caught the killer. Okay, good. That's a good story. Good night. I'm going to rest sadly knowing our criminal justice system gets it right every time they're going to catch the guy. That is so far from the truth. And our show is about exposing that. It's about exposing when you jump to conclusions, when you have investigators who, let's not even say, that's pretty shady stuff that the investigators of that would write. Oh, no struggle, when signs of a struggle exist. But let's say you just have investigators who think they're doing the right thing. Gosh, how many people are behind bars and convicted wrongfully because investigators thought they were doing the right thing? They had this hunch. It was this person. And so what happens is you get this, tunnel vision. And Chris talks about it as investigators. He sees it happen. And, even he has been there where you want to follow these leads all the way until something else comes up. But what's happening is oftentimes you get this tunnel vision. You don't see anything else. You're no longer questioning anyone else. And you're just jumping to what your experience is as an investigator, what majority of these cases show. And you're following that lead, and you're making this circle try to fit in a square. And at the very end, you can get a jury to say, yeah, we agree with you.
Well, I was going to say, I always call that like padding a file, where you just continually interview people that believe the same thing you believe. Mm-hmm. You interview this person. Why? Because I know that this person told me, this person told them this. Well, I want to interview them. I interview them so I start interviewing only people that are in agreement. The moment somebody else says, well, this person doesn't think they did it, I do a cursory investigation, I bolt. So it's 1 page, as opposed to these six different interviews. They're 5 and 6 pages deep. They're all sure. They all know something. But this one guy who said, yeah, but what about this? That's 2 paragraphs. Mm-hmm. And I leave. And I didn't, and anybody he mentioned in there, I didn't follow up on. Any of the things he mentioned, I don't follow up on. So by the time you're done with your file, it's super thick with, this is the guy. Mm-hmm. And here's why. Mm-hmm. And you've got maybe 1 or 2 people that disagree, but they're 3 paragraphs on a couple of pages.
And a great example, I just saw this really good, it was a Netflix missing episode, and they basically had been searching for a suspect for a really long time. This is a case out of Japan, and it was this British woman who was missing in Japan. And there was this investigation, but it was going cold. And what they end up seeing is when they get all this pressure, right? Prime Minister from Britain comes, and then they get all this pressure from Japanese, higher ups. And so now they're taking a second look at the case. And so when these investigators who are tasked with going back to take that second look, they see this part where somebody has this really strong lead. It says, a manager at this place said this guy would come in and he had complaints about this guy from many of the women. But then there's the investigator's conclusion, and he fails to follow up and says, this manager typically tells lies and is unreliable and has issues. I guess they just had issues with him in general. So they just dismissed what he said. In the end, that lead was the suspect. And so they went back and they looked at that lead, and but this is months later, I think years later. So in the meantime, more women are missing, and who knows what he was doing in the meantime. The problem is when you have an investigator who has this bias and isn't looking at every lead and just says, well, I know this guy, I have experience with him, he's unreliable. Well, then nobody else is going to follow up on that. It's so dangerous. It is so dangerous.
I interviewed a guy when he was 16 years old. One of his classmates was killed maybe half a mile or a mile from his house. And he was kind of an odd guy. Like he's like, I had friends. He said I had friends, but they weren't in school. Like they were kids around the neighborhood. So I was a little bit of a loner. Well, the homicide detectives went and talked to several of her friends at school. And they had a psychological profile done by the FBI. And it said it's probably one of her classmates, probably somebody that knows her, probably a loner. And when they told that to the kids, they all pointed, they were like, oh, what about this guy? He has a couple classes with her. They've said hi to each other. They don't really know each other very well, but he's a loner, and he's kind of a little odd. They go, they grab him. They bring him to the police station. They question him for 8 hours. The detective tells him it's not videoed, not recorded. Mm-hmm. And this goes off and on for about a month. Finally, they get him in there, and they question him one day. They polygraph him. They tell him he failed the polygraph. And the detective that's been acting like his buddy, after about 8 hours, he said, I'm in tears. I'm crying. They're telling me this is what I did. They've got a polygraph. They're telling me this.
Coming.
And he goes ahead and he says, look, I'm holding off the other detectives from hurting you. They want to hurt you for what you did. Tell them something and you can go home. Just tell them something so I can get you out of here.
Go home.
So
go home. Famous last words.
So he said, so I tell him based on all the things that they had said, I kind of knew what happened, and I tell him. So he said, in the meantime, of course, I go to jail. He said, well, my mom's I've got like a single mother. She didn't have any money. So he stays in jail for the whole duration. When he goes to trial, so once he's in jail, he says, listen, false confession. So he goes to trial. By the time they go to trial, they get the DNA back. And it says it's not his DNA. Well, now what they say is, well, the girl was promiscuous, even though nothing said that. Keep in mind, his public defender's trying to tell him.
She had intercourse earlier that day, but then this guy came in.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we've heard that one.
And he must have used a condom or something.
That was actually the Central Park 5, I think they tried saying too. Oh, well, this other guy who said he did it and it was his DNA. Oh, yeah, but then these guys came upon her and then killed her. Okay.
Despite all of the evidence, he's found guilty, goes to trial. He fights and fights and fights for 16 years. Finally, the Innocence Project comes along.
Wow.
They turn his case down 3 times, by the way. Because they're like, he's DNA. No, I'm sorry, there's not DNA. They're like, he signed a confession. He confessed.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
So, he's been turned down. He's gone all the way through the appeals process. He's been turned down by the Supreme Court, wouldn't even listen to the case. Like, no, we don't have enough here. So finally, he gets a low-level assistant to say, look, all he's asking for is that you test the DNA against the current DNA, because there was no database when he was found guilty. No database to check it against. They just checked it against him. Wasn't him. So they said, okay, fine. They put it in the system, and comes back to a guy who was 29 years old at the time, kind of a vagrant, drug addict. And the girl currently in prison for murdering a school teacher with 2 kids. So while you guys focused on me and put me in...
He went and killed another woman.
And killed someone else. So even though all the evidence said that it wasn't me, here's what bothers me is it's not just him. It's not just like a detective. It's 2 detectives, probably a few prosecutors.
Oh, absolutely.
And
and was anybody else charged for that, for convicting and going after the wrong guy? You'll never see it. You'll never see a DA charged. You have to have some major misconduct, but just lacking in experience, lacking in skill, lacking in wisdom in your investigation, you're not going to get fired. You're not going to see any discipline. You're not going to go to jail. No, they're just going to sweep it right under the rug and just say, well, that happens. Hey, you know what? Listen, evidence was pointing towards you. We followed the lead until it landed us. And it's just, nobody's held accountable. But guess who suffers? This person who, because they had tunnel vision, 16 years of his life, his whole life, really, because you never come back from that.
Yeah, he got out when he was like 32 years old. What's so funny is and look, I get it. You got out. I'm glad. It's, thank God that happened. I think that's rare that they correct a situation like that. A lot of people with, law enforcement would typically say, well, the system worked. No, the system didn't work. That's very rare. You fought like tooth and nail to keep him in prison. You never relooked at the investigation and never even considered it. But, the problem with this guy is, listen, he's 30. He gets out when he's what, 32, 33? When they came to tell him, he said it took 45 minutes to an hour for the lawyer that came to see him in prison to convince him that this was really happening. Like, he's like, I was sitting there going, no. They haven't tested it yet. She's like, no, they did test it. He's like, no, it won't be tested for like a month. Yeah. He goes, and then even if they test it and they find out it's not mine, and she's like, they've already tested it, it's not yours. He goes, even if that happened, he goes, they're still going to retry me. I'm not getting let out. And she's like, you are getting let out. You're going to be released tomorrow. You have a court date tomorrow. And he's arguing with her.
That mentality makes so much sense, because you were innocent from the start and nobody's hurt you. Right. And then you think,
nothing but bail.
Maybe when I get to the trial, somebody will believe me, right? Because our system has to work. And then you get to that phase and now you're convicted. Okay, well, maybe the appeal will work. Okay, well, then you lose your appeals. Now it's 60 years later. Of course. No, the system's rigged against me. There's no way I'm ever getting out. It's his mentality and the trauma that the way it's taken his adolescence. It's taken those years that were most crucial in career, everything, family. It's all that remains is the shell of a person who now feels like there is a dark black cloud over them, and there is, because all of society has labeled them already this a loner murderer. It's really devastating to see. Did you know one third of DNA?
He's talking at CrimeCon in September. If you want to see him in Orlando.
Oh yeah, CrimeCon. Yeah, we're not going this year. We were there last year. Hey, CrimeCon, what's up with that?
1/3.
A third of DNA of exonerations that resulted from DNA. So a third of DNA exoneration involved false confession. And so that's a big amount. We're talking, these people were exonerated by DNA, but there was a false confession involved. So I don't think people realize you're put in a room, you're being grilled for hours, you're being told you did something, or you're being befriended and told you'll go home if you just give them what they need. You're being withheld food, restroom breaks, it's cold, whatever it may be, whether they're using the Reed technique on you, whether they're using, violence to coerce you. False confessions exist, and a third of DNA exonerations prove that. So it's really scary. But no, our system's not perfect. Investigators are not perfect. There's problems every day, which is why a show like Reasonable Doubt or any other wrongful conviction show, wrongful conviction podcast with Jason Flom, all of those are so necessary to educate our community, educate citizens who are all possible jurors, that you have to really look at the bigger picture here. You have to question everything and hopefully hold account, more. I feel like now there's a little more accountability, little more. We're getting there with genealogy testing, DNA advancements, all of those things. Shows like ours, shows like podcasts out there. I do feel like now prosecutors are being, at least they know, look, you got to do the best job we possibly can, because this can come back and it's not going to look good. The problem is you're also not going to be criminally charged.
Right. It doesn't matter. Listen,
civilly, because you're protected. If they sue, it's not you. They're suing the police department. They're suing the government.
So in my particular case, I won't go through the whole thing, but do you do federal?
No.
Oh man, because state's so much more fair. Well, I mean, I feel. So.
I don't want to mess with federal. I dabbled in the beginning of my career, and it was too much. It was too heavy. I mean, I was young too. I think when I became an attorney, like 26 years old, and I'm just like, this is a lot. And of course, I've always done state work, and you get familiar. I think it's really important that an attorney that you hire is familiar with your local courts. It's familiar with the judges, the DAs they're working with. Not everything has to be completely adversarial. You want somebody who knows what they're working with. I work in all these different counties here in San Francisco, Alameda, and there are counties I just won't go to because people say, can you represent me over here in this county? No, too conservative for me. And I don't want to work. I know what I'm going to get in this county. That county is going to throw the book at you, and it's just exhausting. And I'm coming in with these expectations that it's not going to happen because I practice in more liberal counties. I mean, I'm in the Bay Area of California, right? It's a great jury pool to have. But yeah, I've thankfully got to pick and choose, and I've never done public defender work. I've always done private defense work. So, which means I also have had the privilege of choosing my cases. I work here in my office building is with people who were formerly public defenders. I bow to them. They are amazing. But they've had to take cases that they may not want to take or that they don't believe in. And it's really hard, or they were drained.
Right. So in my case, I got 26 years for bank fraud.
Wow.
And the U.S. attorney said, hey, if he'll be interviewed by Dateline, we'll consider that substantial assistance and we'll reduce his sentence. And so, okay, I'll be interviewed. Of course. I'm super guilty. Like, what choice do I have? So I was interviewed. And, I was interviewed and they air the program, and my lawyer goes and says, hey, he was interviewed. They aired it. You said you'd reduce the sentence. And she goes, I know. The prosecutor said, I know. It's just not enough. But you said you'd consider it substantial assistance. I did consider it, and it's not. So, yeah. So then
there was nothing in writing, huh?
No. Oh no, it's I got you there. So here, a second time it comes back and they say, there's a TV show that wants to interview Mr. Cox. It's called American Greed. And they said, will you be if he's interviewed, will you consider it? She says, well, I mean, obviously I can't promise you anything, but yes, I will definitely consider it. Between the Dateline and this show, obviously we'll consider it substantial assistance. She's like, what choice do you have? I go, well, can we get it in writing? She says, what choice do you have? You got to do it. Like, I'm already in prison. I got 26 years. What choice do I have? I say, oh, go screw you. I'll just do my 26 years. No, I'm going to try. So I do it. I got to hope for the best, right? I go, I do it. They air the show. They come back. And the prosecutor says, it's just not enough.
Wow.
So then I'm approached by a company. All mortgage brokers and loan officers in the country have to do, I think it's 9 hours of continuing education every year. So 3 hours of it is ethics and fraud. Mm-hmm. So I was approached by a national company or a school that teaches those courses and said, we want to write a course on you. He flies up to Atlanta, meets with my U.S. attorney, meets with my attorney, my public defender, who's still representing me for some reason at this point. And she meets with her and she says, absolutely, listen, I'm just trying to pile some stuff up here to present to the judge. I mean, this'll do it. I do the course, they use it, we get a bunch of letters, we go back to the U.S. attorney and she says, not enough. She said, the problem is that these sentencing guidelines are based on someone cooperating where people have been indicted. And Mr. Cox just doesn't have any indictment. So I have no way to really file a Rule 35. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. I can't file one if there's no indictments. And she's like, well, that's not what you've been saying. You said you would consider it. She said, I did. It's just not enough. So I finally filed paperwork, right? I have a guy, he files, a guy who was locked up with, he was a lawyer, and I was locked up with him. And he took on my case and he filed.
I love that.
Oh, it's much better than I can even tell you. Like, he's got 22 years. He's a rapid cycling bipolar that believes God is telling him he's preordained to be emperor of the world.
Let's keep him behind bars.
Yeah. No, he got himself out.
Great.
He got. But it didn't.
It's like the Lori Vallows of the world. It's like, oh my God.
But it didn't.
Still believes she killed her kids for God.
But it doesn't seem to affect his legal work, which doesn't say much for your profession. So he was running a medium-sized law firm out of the prison. He'd hired he'd trained a bunch of guys to do paperwork for him, write motions, and he wrote more complicated motions like 2255s, things like that. So he takes on my case. And by the way, I contacted several attorneys on the street, and they all said, you cannot, in your district, like, this is in California, you're in the northern district of Georgia. They're like, you can't force them to reduce your sentence. Like, there's just no way. He says, no, I'm going to get it done. I will not let them do this to you. I mean, he's out there. It's like, okay. So I remember he said, when my legions march upon Washington, I was like, yeah, listen, man, I just want to get some time off. So
listen, some pretty smart people are pretty out there. So.
Listen, he got
Look at Elon Musk.
he got 7 years knocked off my sentence. So in the federal system, for every 3,500 2255s that are filed, one gives you relief.
True.
One actually provides relief for the inmate. Not to get out of jail free, but any movement at all is relief. So I got 7 years off. But wait, there's more. So as soon as I get back, I'm walking the compound. I still got like 8-9 years to go, So I'm walking the compound with this guy, this old con man, and he's actually cooperating in his case and against his co-defendants, and he keeps telling me that they're not going to reduce his sentence. And I'm like, well, why not? You're cooperating. You might even testify in a trial, And he says, they think I've hidden Ponzi scheme or Ponzi money. He had a Ponzi scheme for like $100 million Ponzi scheme. He lost $57 million. So I'm like, you didn't hide any, so don't worry about it. We're walking, months go by. He mentions it a couple times. So finally I go, you keep saying that. but they'd have to prove you had hidden the money. He goes, well, here's the problem. He said, I remember he goes, can I trust you?
I love the jail conversation. Geez.
And I go, probably not. And he starts laughing. He goes, ha, ha, ha. And he said, I did hide money, but I gave money to my wife and my brother. And my fear is my wife found out. My wife found out I was having an affair. And my fear is she's going to turn the money in to make sure I don't get any time off. And my brother, he's like a good Christian guy. And if they just ask him, he'll tell them. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, really? Oh, I was like, well, I'm sure that won't happen. So I had written a memoir, for myself. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to include some of the things that had been said at my resentencing. Because, they literally brought me back to like Atlanta and back, to be resentenced. Mm-hmm. So I called my attorney. She was supposed to send me my transcript and never did. And I said, hey, I need my transcript. And she's like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. So she said, I'll send it to you. And then I remember she said, what's going on in there? And I went, nothing. What do you mean? And she goes, anything happening? And I go, like what? And this was weeks after I'd had that conversation. She said, I don't know, just wondering how you're doing, if everything's okay. Is anything happening? And I said, you know what? Listen to this. And I told her. And she goes, well, let me look into it. Maybe that could help you. And I go, they didn't want to give me anything to begin with, So, like I said, that guy, the crazy guy had got me 7 years off. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so what happens is a week later, I get called into, let's say, it's called SIS, but, the lieutenant's office. And he says, here, you got a phone call. And I'm like, what's going on? So, Secret Service agent. He said, I understand that you know where Ron Wilson hid Ponzi scheme money. I go, oh, no. I said, I want something in writing that says I will get my sentence reduced. I go, because it's not a lot of money. And I said, I seriously doubt that you guys are going to give him any more time. And I don't see you charging his wife or charging anybody else in this crime. I said, but I do know where there's a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I'll get back with you. So he ends up sending me, I get him on my email system. He ends up emailing me a copy of a letter from the U.S. attorney saying, if Mr. Cox provides information that leads to the recovery of funds or leads to indictments, we will consider it substantial assistance. Now he goes, that's the best you're going to get. I said, that's fine. I tell him what happened. He goes and talks to the wife and the brother. They immediately give up $500,000. They indict them. Both of them they got 6 months probation, 50 hours of community service, something ridiculous, nothing. And then the Wilson guy, he got 6 months added onto his sentence. So I'm thinking they're not going to give me anything. And sure enough, they don't give me anything. So I get the lawyer to file another 2255. And when we file the 2255, the government's response is, Mr. Cox says that he's been cooperating with us and that he's been in communication with the U.S. Attorney's Office and that we agreed to reduce his sentence. We don't even know what Mr. Cox is talking about. We've never heard anything about this. We don't have any type of an agreement with Mr. Cox. We're not going to reduce this. And so I send, in one of our filings, we send the letter. See, what they didn't realize was that the Secret Service agent was going to forward me the letter. Mm. It wasn't really a letter to me. It was a letter to them, between them, where they said, look, you tell Mr. Cox, we agree, blah, 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 blah. So I send that. And I'm like, this is what he provided me. And sure enough, in it, he provided me, hey, this is what your agreement is with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Here's a copy of the...
Wow.
Still, they fought it, but this...
Wilson knew not to trust you, and he did.
I don't feel bad for Wilson at all. No, I sleep like a baby. Listen, I have no problem.
Listen, I always tell people the number one thing is, and that's the thing, right? In exchange, you receive something in exchange. And, it's so funny when people there's somebody in trial, they're coming forward from prison and this is what he told me. It's like, no, I'm not getting anything in exchange. It's like, bullshit. Really? You don't expect
Of course I want something in exchange.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and the situation that you're in, Do you go ahead and say something, or you just do your 20 years?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to do my 20 years.
I
I'm
can't
not doing my
imagine.
20 years.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have 20
So
years
how
coming.
much did you get off more?
5 more years.
Wow.
But we had to fight for it. The guy had to file another 2255. Would they go back? We don't know it. Then we send the thing in.
He's a good attorney.
Right. But here's the thing. That U.S. attorney has blatantly lied. You just told the court you have no idea. Your name's on the... You sent this. You just lied to the court. Wasn't charged.
Yeah. No. Oh, absolutely not. No.
And we're not talking about like it wasn't a casual, oh, it slipped my mind. What are you talking about? This is an entire, you've got a whole motion here.
Yeah.
Actively fighting and lying to the court at the same time. And so,
Right.
So when people think, oh, well, the government wouldn't, you can trust the government. You can, listen, I had the Secret Service agent telling me, look, I promise you will get something. I said, man, cut it out, bro. I said, this isn't my first rodeo. I said, I know for a fact you can't promise me anything. Your word is no good at all. And he was like, I said, it is.
Look at that. I mean, imagine if you never met that attorney in jail.
Are you listen, that guy got himself out. He's in Orlando right now.
Do you guys stay in touch?
I wrote a book on him, about him. It's amazing. He's an amazing individual who is, listen, like most of the people I met in prison who are not, very few of the people I met in prison who are brilliant. So I've met several people that are friends that are brilliant, amazing people, but are just deeply, deeply flawed individuals. They have issues, myself included.
Yeah, we all do. We all do, but especially, I mean.
But your flaws didn't end you up in prison.
No, but statistics show, no. I mean, it just depends on how each person deals with trauma. It's very different, right? So you have your adverse childhood, trauma that occurs, and some people take it one way. I mean, when I was younger, our middle brother died, and my older brother was so angry by it. It was a very violent, sudden death. My middle brother was hit by a train and killed. And I was younger, and I took the pain and all the trauma, and I think I turned it for good, because I said my situation, as far as why I became a lawyer, was witnessing the case happen with my parents and how they're trying to sue the railroad, and I'm their attorney was just this gritty people's lawyer who worked so hard, and he was always disheveled and chaotic, but he was just such a hard worker, just a lover of people and helping them. And I remember thinking, I want to do that one day. Like, I want to be that resource for people who don't have a voice, right? I'm Latina. I come from like this, lower income community where my parents didn't really have the resource. So to have this gentleman come in and be their voice, like, I saw how much it meant to our family. And I thought, I want to do that one day. I knew I always wanted to be a lawyer, but specifically a people's lawyer, right? Not corporate or anything like that. But my oldest brother, who has also unfortunately recently passed away, sadly, he struggled in life with drugs, alcohol, and in the end, I think that took a toll on his heart, and that's what took him at the young age of 45 years old. But we're two siblings, same parents, same upbringing. But what happens, each adverse childhood experience, it's going to affect everyone differently, and it doesn't mean we're all built the same. And that's what I've come to understand and learn and love about my clients is I see them as my brother, as somebody who was a good person, a loving person, actually one of the best people, because let me tell you, those people, they don't judge other people because they've got their own baggage. They just love on everyone. They won't judge other people like those of us who think we have it all together. And so it's just a matter of, and statistics show that people who are going to end up in the criminal justice system have these ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and they just deal with it differently. It's traumatically affected that frontal lobe area that wasn't fully developed at a young age. And so all of those things, those childhood experiences, you may not think are a big deal, but whether it's divorce, whether it was your mom not being present, constantly working, not having a caretaker, not being hugged, whatever it may be, that is having an effect on you. And that does later affect whether somebody's going to end up in the criminal justice system or not. So yeah, we're all a little messed up, but it's just how we've handled that, and how we've developed, how our brain develops. It's not necessarily our fault, especially when you've experienced trauma before the age of 18. It's really going to predict your future. So if we could look at individuals like that and at a young age, try to get them the help, the counseling, the resources, have just a positive role model in their life, it could really make a difference. But I don't know how I got off on that tangent. But anyway, I don't have much more longer. I do have to get on a few calls, but
Okay.
This has been fun.
Yeah, I'll if you email me your mailing address, I will mail you that book.
Oh,
I promise, like it's not like an urban novel or anything. Like it's well written. It's it's a good book. It's I've written several books, so
that's great. I hope Chris was talking about his book that he's writing on your podcast. I haven't hit the author stage yet, though. But I have enjoyed Chris's book and a couple others. I got to on our podcast. We had a Crime and Cookie Juice for a while, Chris and I, and we still have it. We're just on hiatus because we're working on another podcast, but. We got to have Justin Brooks, who was the California Innocence Project director, he recently wrote a book that basically, I think it's called You Can't Go to Prison Even Though You're Innocent. And he talked about a lot of his stories and how they overcame it. Years later, people were getting out of prison. And it's great to know that our system can right a wrong. It just takes really long. And in your situation too, it takes a lot of perseverance and the right person to really fight for you. We have a lot of cases right now. Chris and I are specifically working on one case that was on our show years ago where a young man was convicted of shooting his girlfriend, tying his girlfriend up and shooting her in the head and leaving her in the basement. And then going and taking her ATM and taking $300 cash out. Okay. This is beautiful, young lovers. There's no issue of he leaves her for another girl. Nothing else. Just she's executed in her head and tied up. And they arrest him. There's a false confession involved, coerced false confession. He was charged back in 2011. He has been on home arrest for 3 years because they are giving him a new trial based on something that happened with a jury form. We always believed in his case, believed he was innocent. And now they have found the suspect, a random, just wanderer, a guy living out of his, he was a semi-truck driver, living out of his truck, kind of like a wilderness man, just lived out of his truck, lived off the land. And he had, they finally tested this cigarette butt they had. And they had ran it through the CODIS system, right? That's our national system to see if it matched anybody. It didn't. But now, years later, they ran it through the genealogy. They used genealogy on the DNA. And they found the relative, and then they found him, somebody who had spent time in the area. Now he was living out of state Montana, and the murder occurred in Michigan. Well, they found him, and this has all happened, okay, Matt, in the last month. They found him. They were doing surveillance, everything. But in the last month, this is what happened. They interviewed him. He says his story. Oh, yeah, I lived there whenever they were conducting surveillance. They couldn't help but notice he would never leave any cigarette. He was still a smoker, would never leave cigarettes behind. He knows now he's under surveillance. Finally, they get a search warrant. Finally. They can't find him. They can't locate him, but they locate he's now still living out of a semi-truck. They locate the semi, and what do they find?
Cigarette
murder weapon.
Oh.
The murder weapon from 2011. And that was found in 2023. He still had the gun. And it matched the ballistics. And they arrested him in the middle of transport. He escaped. They found him in a kayak in the middle of the river somewhere. They finally got him back to Michigan. They just charged him. He was just arraigned. And now, guess what? Our boy, the young boyfriend who 10 years ago was charged with our murder, case hasn't been dismissed yet, right?
Because now they were just working together.
Yeah.
He was your part. That was your part.
He was 20, and this guy was like 32.
Where the whole time they were arguing, he was the lone killer the whole time, and now suddenly they were working together.
the surveillance video of the guy who used the ATM to get $300 never matched our guy, the young man. He was a little,
Just had a friend.
little shorter.
He said it was just a guy help.
So now we're like, but you know what? We laugh about it, but knowing what our system puts people through, and knowing how these investigators and prosecutors don't want to admit they were wrong, we are terrified because the case still is not dismissed. Are they going to get this guy to say that he worked with this young kid, college kid? But from the start, nothing added up. The way the murder happened, all of it. But here he was years later. Here he still is. And finally, they just removed conditions of home arrest, and I think now he's just got an ankle bracelet on. But this poor kid needs to be exonerated. This kid needs to be declared innocent so that he can get his life back. So that's a case that Chris and I are currently working on, getting a podcast out on.
Horrific about that is that the likelihood that people think, oh, well, it's a done deal. You don't understand. Like there's still a chance he goes to prison. Mm-hmm. Like, we're laughing about it, but just like you said, like everything's, it's ridiculous. Listen, people have gone to prison in less ridiculous situations. They, like you said, they just don't want to say they messed up. Like, what's wrong with saying that?
Look, from the start, nothing added up. What was taken from the home when she was killed? A bedspread and some clothing. Okay, we are talking about, and the person using the ATM looks like he's wearing one of the articles of clothing. And so now we find out he's more of a wilderness man, a person like who's homeless, living out of his truck. It makes more sense, right? But yet here we are still. Yeah,
that was she was shopping.
Right, exactly. So that's what we're working on right now. Hopefully we can get, we can head to Michigan and do some interviews with all parties involved. Hopefully the new suspect may talk to us. I don't know. We'll see. As a criminal defense attorney, I would never want my client doing that, but you never know. So that's what Chris and I are kind of chasing that case right now because we've been with it since 2018. And we always knew this young man was innocent, but this is what you got to go through. 2023, new suspect in custody, but doesn't mean.
Do you have a podcast? You're saying you're still working with Chris, but I mean, do you have a podcast separately?
Chris and I are always working together because we still have, from Reasonable Doubt, even though we no longer have the television show, that is our passion. And we do stand behind a lot of the people that were on the show. And so we have a case out of Washington, a case of Evaristo Salas. We have the Casey Grondin case out of Michigan. We had Glenn Simmons' case. He was just released. We constantly work with the family still and following up on the cases. I stay in touch with the attorneys on the cases. So Chris and I are always things are always happening with us. We did have Crime and Cookie Juice, and people can go and check it out on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. Crime and Cookie Juice podcast, where we talk a lot about issues, how people do end up wrongfully convicted. And we put that on hiatus because now with all these developments in this case that we followed for so many years, we are in the process of making a limited series podcast on just this specific case. So separate from Crime and Cookie Juice. Yes. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, if you ever need, any guests or anything, like I've been doing this 2 years. I got tons of them. Well, when we start up Crime and Cookie Juice again, absolutely. We love to have some fascinating individuals on to talk about their cases. Russ would be one, like we're super interested. That takes a lot of time and preparation on our behalf because I do like to know what I'm getting into when I'm interviewing someone. So once we can figure out what's happening with this one case that we're really passionate about, getting this young man completely declared innocent, then we'll go back to Crime and Cookie Juice. Yeah. But I also am sitting here in my office. I have my legal practice and I have a full caseload. So there's a lot. It gets a little overwhelming. So. Okay. Well, I will let you go. I know you want to wrap it up. I know you didn't expect it to this much time. So hold on. Give me 1 second. 1 second. Do you have any links or anything you want me to put in the description?
Sure. You could put my Instagram, which is at Fatima Silva ESQ.
Okay. Well, I'll also have, we'll also put the link in the description too. So, hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, leave a comment in the comment section, and in the description box, we're going to leave Fatima's Instagram link. And in the meantime, if she comes up with any other links, maybe the maybe a link to the Spotify, the podcast, Crimes and Cookies, Cookie Juice.
Yeah, Crimes and Cookies.
Crimes and Cookie Juice. We might put that in there. I don't know. Check out the description box. I really appreciate you guys watching. See ya.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am going to be interviewing Chip Williamson. He runs a YouTube channel called Crime and Entertainment. Chip has a crime story, so check this out. So obviously, I know you because you interviewed me on Crime and Entertainment.
Correct.
And you started it how long?
Probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I don't remember the exact date on the YouTube because we were doing some audio only before that, but I'd say roughly 2 years ago.
So, and that started because of you getting arrested for the charge was murder, right?
It was murder and possession of weapon during a violent crime. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, we'll get into that, but let me start with basically at the beginning.
Yeah.
Where you were born?
I grew up in a town called Darlington, South Carolina, which is really known for not a lot but the racetrack.
Right.
That's about all there is there. To do anything, any sort of nightlife or anything like that, you had to go to a neighboring town, Florence. And I grew up there, went to school there all the way up through graduation, went to technical college to be a welder. I worked in radio for a little bit during that time. And then I got my first welding job. And then not long after that, I met my wife, or soon-to-be wife. We met there. She had a daughter when we met.
Where'd you meet her? Where?
It was actually at a club in Florence. It was, I remember people older than me. I always hung out with people older than me. And they used to tell me this club called Murphy's that everyone would go to. Well, when I was on the cut, I was like 17 and some change, so not technically legal to be able to get into it, but, almost there. The club had burnt down. So when it got rebuilt, just the hype with this club was unbelievable that everybody, was coming back up. And so we went, or I'd been going every weekend since it opened. Well, she was from about 45 minutes out of town. But, even up there, they knew that this club was supposed to be, really cool. They remodeled a lot. And the weird thing was, the first week we was there, a classmate of mine seen her outside. One of the girlfriends that she come down with couldn't get in. And so they were having issues at the door, and my wife had her ID, so she's just standing there kind of waiting for us to play out, and she struck up a conversation with my classmate. So they wound up not even getting in that week. The following week, they come back in. She recognized the girl from the week before and is having a conversation with her. Well, me knowing the classmate, I'm like, who the hell is she talking to? This girl's beautiful.
Right.
And so I waited till they separate, and I come straight up to her. I'm like, all right, who was that? And she's like, oh, that's my friend Felicia. She says she thinks you were cute. And I'm just like, that's all I need to know.
Right.
So, went over there and run a little game. And, as they say, the rest is history. But that spawned our relationship. We were together for about, I think, 7 or 8 years. Then we got engaged. We got engaged quickly, but we got married after about 7 or 8 years. She had a daughter when we met that was 3 years old. So I've raised her now. She's 22 now. And then we wound up having a son who's now 13.
Okay. So where'd you end up living?
We stayed there for the most part until 2010. And at that point, I was working for a company called Nucor Steel. And it's a pretty big steel company. They're one of the biggest in the world. And I was working at a division in Columbia, which was about an hour and a half drive. But it was straight nights. I just night shift. There was no swing shift. It was just straight nights. And I hated it, especially after I had my son. It was just, I was gone all the time. And even when you're home, you're just tired because you've been up all night, and it was just wasn't something I really wanted to continue as a career, but I didn't want to leave the company. And then they had an opportunity for the same company, but a different mill in Charleston. So we made the decision to move up to Charleston, and we moved up here in 2010. I got lucky because the housing market, had just crashed recently. And so I was able to come in and get houses that were built, a year prior for, hundreds of thousands of dollars and get it for about half of what they paid for it. So that worked out. And then we all moved up here to Charleston, and I stayed with the same company. was working at the one up there. The only difference there is you would work 4 days on, and then you would have 4 days off. So essentially you only worked half the year, but it still would rotate nights to days. So I had some nights mixed in there, but nowhere near as much as the other place that was like straight nights.
Right.
And
I've worked nights before.
Yeah,
I worked as a welder's helper for 6 months one time, and it was the night shift. It was it 84 hours a week or something like that? I mean, it was straight. It was every single day straight. You know, you got a per diem, but it was just hell. It was horrible. Like you, by the time you drive back home, it's just in time to go to sleep, wake up, make your lunch, jump in the car, drive an hour and a half back. Horrible.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, luckily we didn't have to. I mean, the plant was close, so we didn't have to worry about the per diem. But I mean, it was nice in the sense that you get your schedule for the whole year. So I could look at a paper and I know exactly what days I'm having off. So if I wanted to plan a vacation or whatever, you know, a trip, you could plan it inside of those 4 days. And then you really wouldn't have to use vacation unless something just fell on a day where you were scheduled to work that you absolutely had or wanted to go to. So it was nice. And they were a great company too. And it is beneficial to the part we'll get into a little bit later on. Once a year, it's usually around March, I think it is, they give out what's called a yippee check. And it's basically a portion of the profits to every employee.
Nice.
Now, they weren't doing as great. Obviously, we talked about it was kind of the recession at this time, but they were still giving out about $9,000 to $12,000 per year, and that goes straight into your 401k, and then you get like a portion of that deposited to you. So maybe $1,000. I think it might have been like $2,000, and they tax it, so you wind up getting like $1,200, something like that. Well, as the economy started getting better, those checks started getting better. So I think one of the last ones that I got was like about 15 grand. So I mean that's nice to go straight into your 401k.
Just out of the blue.
Yeah. Well, you know that you're going to get it. They call it Yippee Day every year. That check's going to come. So a lot of people look forward for that. They call the Yippee Day and then Black Day because right after Black Day is when people that are on the edge of retirement, they make sure they get that Yippee check and then they go on about their business and retire. But, I mean, it was a tough job, but, you know, fortunately, I was able to build up my 401k pretty substantially, which drastically helped out in the situation I would come to find myself in a little bit later on.
Okay. So you're living in Charleston. Everything's going good. Mm-hmm. And what's going on with, I mean, marriage is good. There's no problems.
It was good. I'd probably say if I had to put a pinpoint on like where things started, there was a Carolina country music festival that was being held in Myrtle Beach. And it was kind of like their version of Woodstock. You know, there was, I can't remember the people's names now. It was Eric Church was going to be there, Lady Antebellum, Cole Swindell, just a lot of the top country singers at the time. But they would start like middle of the day and then play up until, you know, late at night. And we seen this and we was like, this would be a cool concert to go to. So we went down there and I actually went down on Thursday night. Another one of my buddies met me, my wife and a bunch of our other friends came down Friday. But like, it was pretty much just a drink fest type concert.
Right.
And Saturday, another one of my buddies that came late, he was like a certified EMT. And he always tells me, he's like, you can't tell people I did that. So I can't tell his name. But he seen me and he's like, dude, he's like, you look awful. He's like, have you slept? And I'm like, not much. And he's like, I got something for you. And he goes down to the car. He brings back an IV bag. And he hooks up the IV bag to me, and I'm sitting there in the chair, and there's a picture. I have to see if I can find it and send it to you. But I'm sitting there in the chair. I've got an IV bag hooked to me, and I'm still get a beer in my hand. And then you can look on the counter behind me, and there's like every liquor bottle you can think of on the counter behind me. So it was a good time. But now following that, we go home.
He gave you the IV because he felt like you just had too much alcohol in your system. And,
yeah.
But you wanted to keep drinking.
Yeah, want to keep going. Right. So, from what I understand, they do that in Vegas quite often.
Unbelievable. So
yeah, we finished this weekend. The last concert was on Sunday night. And so get up Monday morning, head back. Now, mind you, I haven't been home since I left work to go down there. So I've got a lot of stuff I got to do to get ready, you know, wash clothes, get ready to go to work next morning. Had to be to work at 6 a.m. So I'm leaving my house around 5. Get in the car, heading to work, and there's really no other way to put it. I just got sleepy. Right. And went off the road. You always have that sound when you go off the road that you notice, like, shit, you know. But it was like, I heard that sound for like 2 seconds, and then I heard like a baseball bat hitting a light pole. I mean, it was just, pow! And at that point, I could tell that I was airborne. And like, for a minute, there was nothing. It was like I was floating, and I was just like, where did I run off a cliff? Like, what the hell's going on? And it was just bam, 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 bam.
Where did you hit?
They were extending out a road, making it a 2-lane into a single lane into 2 lanes on each side. So they were digging out with the backhoe. I hit the area where they stopped for the day or for the time period. And when I went off, I hit like a huge section of concrete that was just there, sitting there. And when I hit it, it basically sent the car in like a torpedo mode. So I was flipping corner to corner, not end over end. And so the car finally comes to a stop. It's sitting upside down on another car. And that was the only thing that I could visually see because it was dark. I seen the windshield of that other car. But at the time, I didn't know if I was on the road. So I'm like, I might have just killed somebody. You know, I was really nervous, but I had my seatbelt on. It's probably the only thing that saved me, really. And I typically don't wear seatbelts, but I did that morning. So I'm trying to brace below my head so when I undo my seatbelt, I don't fall on my neck.
Right.
As I'm doing that and wiggling, it rolls off the truck onto the side. So now it's sitting like this with me in the top portion of the driver's seat. So then I get out. The windows are all busted, but I had tint on the windows, so they're not like shattered everywhere, which was good. So I rolled it down, and I was able to literally just climb out of the top. So I climbed out, and I looked like the first thing I seen was like the driver's side front wheel was completely gone. Wasn't there. And I get up there. I'm kind of sitting around. I'm trying to get my bearings, and this car comes riding by. And he's like, dude, are you all right? And I said, I think so. And he's like, you need me to call somebody? And I said, yeah, I guess just call an ambulance. You know, maybe something's wrong that I haven't figured out yet. You know, I don't know. And he's like, well, you don't need me to stay, do you? I was like, nah, I don't know if he was drunk or what he was, but I was just like, nah, go ahead. Just call him for me if you don't mind, because I didn't know where my phone was. So I was trying to pick out like the best place to hop down, because I was like, I don't want to live through this wreck, hop down, then that car move again and fall on me.
Yeah.
So I got down. My phone was actually in my pocket. I never took it out, so I knew where that was. I walked up to this house, and the house was real distinctive. It was one of those houses where the whole house looked like a roof, and it come all the way down to almost like mid-level. But it was a very odd built house. And I remember like looking at that as I walked up, like, wow, this is a crazy looking house. So I knocked on the door, and the dude comes, and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, man, I just had an accident out here with your pickup truck. And he's like, huh? I said, I landed on top of your pickup truck. And he's like, man, that's my wife's truck. She's had that thing since high school. And I'm like, well,
Not now.
My bad, bro. And he just shuts the door. Just shut it. He didn't say, you okay? You want a drink? Anything I can do for you? You know, a cold rag, nothing. He just shut the door and walked away. So I'm like, all right, guess he's going back to bed. So I was waiting. The ambulance got there. Looking around, it's like, where's the driver? And I'm like, I'm the driver. And it's like, where's the passenger? I'm like, there wasn't any passengers that I know of. It was just me. I guess they couldn't believe that wreck I was walking around, because I'll show you some pictures of this wreck. It's insane. Like every part of the car is dented in, moonroof blown out, front bumper completely gone, tire completely gone. I mean, it was a mess. Like even when we went later on to pick it up from the record, a guy asked how the driver was, and I was like, you're looking at him. And he's like, oof, figured you'd have been gone. But this started a situation that I had to deal with my back, because I really did get hurt. It wasn't something that was hurt like right off the bat, but it did develop me a lot of back problems that I still deal with.
Did you go to the hospital?
Yeah, I went to the hospital. I called after I was waiting when he shut the door on me. I called my wife and let her know. Then I called my job and obviously let them know that I wouldn't be coming in. And the ambulance got there, and my wife was on the way. So by the time she got there, it looked a lot worse, because they're transporting me to the hospital. So they've got me on a board. They've got tape wrapped around my head. Yeah. They've got a neck brace on. I mean, I look like I'm, in bad shape. Yeah. And she's panicking. She's, oh my God. And I'm just like, no, it's cool. It's just precaution. Like I was literally just standing up 2 minutes ago. So we go to the emergency room and they run tests and x-rays, and the guy comes back out and he's like, I don't know what your religion is or who you pray to. He's like, but just keep it up. It's working. And I was like, all right. But then like a week later, I started, which I knew I was going to be sore the next couple of days anyway. That's always how wrecks are.
Yeah.
And I started developing some pain in my lower back. And it's like my L4, L5, L5, and S1 are just really, really damaged back there. And since then, I've been using different techniques to try to help it, different shots, cortisone shots. I mean, different things. They're saying it's not imperative enough to go in and require surgery to do it, because then you're going to have a permanent discomfort for the rest of your life. But if we can manage it to where you can, get by without having to do it, it's better this way. So those are the steps I've been following since then. But that particular incident kind of started a chain reaction because I was out of work for a little while. The job that I had got filled. I still had a job in the company, but the particular job that I had that time got filled. So I had to come back and take another job, which wasn't as desirable because this plant's got like 5 different divisions in the plant. I mean, there's hundreds of jobs, but the one that I had originally, I really, really liked. And I wound up having to go to another one. And that was kind of, I would say, what started the ball rolling on problems. And then what really kicked it into high gear was I had a friend of mine. He lived 2 houses down from me. Now, this is a community much like, the one we're in. Everybody's real close-knit. And we had a group of friends that would get together on the weekends. And our kind of tradition was we would go on Fridays to a Mexican restaurant, hang out for a little bit, then go back to one of our houses in the group and just hang out in the garage and chill out, Well, this one particular Friday, I could tell that the guy and his wife wasn't getting along. And which, I ain't gonna say that was unusual, but they didn't do it a lot to the point you go say, oh, well, there they go again.
Yeah.
But great dude. Anytime I'd ever met him, always offered, to bring something or, great mood, wife, 2 kids, good job, off on Fridays, had a Harley, bike, boat, drove a Mercedes. Like, if you were to say, give me a life as a 40-something-year-old man, that's the guy's life you want.
Right.
And so we leave there. We go to a friend's house. We're all sitting around. You could tell he was probably drank, 1 or 2 more drinks than usual. And my wife calls me. She's actually at another friend of ours' house that's like right around the corner. And she's like, hey, come over here and, hang out with us for a little bit. So I was like, all right. So I told everybody there bye. Literally like down the street to the right. That's where they live at. So I'm there maybe 15, 20 minutes. We're talking. And then all of a sudden you hear the scream. But we have a lot of kids in our neighborhood. So we weren't sure if it was kids playing or whatever, because it wasn't super late, maybe 10 o'clock. And then the more you heard it, you could tell it was a serious style scream, like something was wrong. And I remember it real, real vividly because the song Johnny Cash Hurt was playing on the radio. So it was like, it kind of gave a more eerier feeling than normal. Cause I remember thinking like, God, every time I hear that song, I think about this. But so we go out and there's only from that guy's house we were at, there's only like 3 houses up entrance to the neighborhood. But the first house is the couple that I was referring to. So it's only like a 2-house gap between them and their house. So I go running up, and there's this woman rolling around in the ground, just screaming to the top of her lungs, can't stop. If she does stop, then she takes a breath and starts screaming again.
Is this your buddy's wife?
Yes. I didn't know it at the time. For whatever reason, the guy whose house that I was with, he went straight in the house. I don't know what prompted him to do that, but I thought, because there was a car stopped, I think just trying to figure out what was going on, I was thinking maybe there was a domestic something, guy hit a girl, she's rolling around on the ground, something like that. So I go to the girl on the ground. Once I roll her over, I realize it's the couple that we were with at the Mexican restaurant. But she's already in like night clothes. I just left, they were in, street clothes. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? And she's like, he did it, he shot himself. And I was like, who? And she said his name, and I was like, oh. So I go running in the house, and the way his house was set up, you come in, you had a dining room to the left, open area living room to the right, and then kitchen was like open to the dining room. And I seen a pair of feet like hanging out. And when I cut the corner, the other friend of mine whose house we were at, before when all this happened, he was already at his head. He had his shirt off. He had like wrapped it around his head. And at the end of the day, what had happened was the guy put a gun in his mouth and he committed suicide. And Matt, when I tell you this was the worst thing I had ever seen in my life, like I had never seen nothing like it before. I've been with family members that are older and passed away, so I've seen death and I've seen people die, but that's different. Like this was, it was just I get more nightmares about that than I do anything that I've went through since then. And I think that was just something that kind of started me on a downward spiral. I'd say probably a depression too. And it led to me and my wife kind of arguing a great deal.
He's been known to cure insecurity just with his laugh. His organ donation card lists his charisma. His smile is so contagious. Vaccines have been created for it. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
You didn't know, you knew the couple you'd had dinner with, but you weren't, like, were they a part of your group?
Yeah, I'd only recently met him, I'd say probably like 2 months. So we hadn't known each other, like I said, years and years, but he was just one of them people that as soon as he come in, he was going to click with whatever group he was with. Super nice guy.
So what did you find out happened? He just walked in there, pulled the fucking gun? Like,
remember I told you I could tell they were arguing at the dinner. Yeah. And from what I know, they had some arguments earlier on in the dinner. And there was a lot of stuff, I guess, behind the scenes that people didn't know. And it boiled over that night. And it was a situation where he had apparently threatened to do this a couple times. And so it was, probably thought it was that again, but this time he actually went through with it. But he had never said that around any of the guys that had been with him. Hey, I'm battling, I'm struggling. That was never done. So obviously, you hear that, you're thinking, well, he's probably doing that to control the woman,
right?
Which is, sadly, some people do that. They'll threaten that to keep a woman under control. But like, if I'd had to put money on any of my friends doing it, he would have been the last one to do it. Because like I said, he had on the surface, he had everything you wanted for a guy at his age.
So that slowly started leading to, you and your wife start having problems. Like, what are those arguments over?
At the time, drinking. I just didn't want to be home. I felt like if I was home, I was just going to sit there and be miserable. And it was, and a lot of it was my fault. I'll square the shoulders on a lot of it, put the blame on my shoulders. We had issues from before, not I shouldn't say issues, but we had petty fights about stuff. But like, how women are, sometimes they will come back up later on. And I'm not that type of guy. Like when we put a problem or an issue to bed, I don't want to bring it up again in 6 months.
Yeah.
And sometimes that would happen. And it was just like, it was getting to the point where I told my wife, I was like, you know what, we need a break. And I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't say, it's over, don't ever want to see you again. That eventually led to that. We were going to get a divorce, but at first we was just like, hey, we need a break. We need to separate. And once we separated, I let her stay in the house that we were living at, and I moved into someone's house that was still in the neighborhood that was around the corner. And I told him, told her, I was like, look, I said, if you start seeing somebody, like, you got to let me know, because I'm not going to be paying the bills at this house and another dude coming over sitting on my couch and watching ESPN on my TV.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So eventually that did start to happen. She did meet somebody, and I figured she would meet somebody. I mean, my wife's a great chick, and she's got her, she went and got her master's. She just recently got her doctorate. So like, she's very smart. And she brings a lot to the table. So I knew if she started to be actively looking, it would not take long for someone to jump on that. So I didn't even have a problem with the guy, doing that. If I would have been in his situation, I would have jumped at the chance too. So when this happened, this is in 2017. The guy's suicide was in like July, August. This is around November when she tells me that, she met someone. And I'm just like, all right, well, you remember the transition I told you, you have to slide on out. Wherever you go is up to you. And November the 1st, it was the day after Halloween. I remember we went over there and took my son trick-or-treating. And then the next day she moved out to another house. The way our neighborhood is set up, you got like 5 different communities. So you have mine, which is like Old Rice, then you have, 2 or 3 more all the way back. I mean, it goes for miles.
Yeah, that's like this one. You
Yeah.
saw all the different subdivisions,
Yeah.
all located in one massive community.
Right. And that's exactly what we are. And she moved in one about 3 subdivisions back. And I mean, I broke her balls for a little bit about it. I'm like, you couldn't have moved like, 10 minutes away,
Right.
something like that. And then I got to bump into you at Publix or something. But, it still wasn't hateful. It wasn't like we hated each other. And, that was the situation. I mean, she was doing her thing. She met the guy moved in. I was doing my thing. And it was what it was. We were going to get a divorce.
Did you know the guy?
No, I had no idea who he was. He was not from around here. He had recently moved here. And so we were going forward with everything. We agreed we were going to get a divorce, partly because I could give her some of my money from my 401k. And it was kind of a workaround for me. I was going to agree to pull more out than what she wanted. And then she was going to give it back to me.
Right.
So if she
So
only
you don't
wanted
have to pay the fees.
right,
and
don't have to
right,
pay the
right.
fees and all that. It was a way for me to kind of get an early withdrawal, basically, a little workaround. So if the IRS is listening, that didn't happen. So we're good.
That's fine. No harm, no foul.
So that was the plan. So I hired a divorce attorney. And we just really didn't talk until around the month of December. We were trying to figure out like how we were going to do things with the kids and, who was going to go where, what was going to go what. And we were just talking. I'm like, well, how's things going with you? And she's like, not too good, this, that, and the other. And, I was just kind of, messing with her. I was like, I told you, you're going to have a hard time trying to find somebody that's going to put up with all your shit, you know? And slowly but surely we started kind of talking again. But I think we both weren't sure if it was something we wanted to restart, but there was definitely still love there, and that was normal.
Yeah, that's very common.
Yeah.
I was actually saying that to Connor. I was like, guys will you can have a breakup and then it's funny, even couples that are at each other's throat, you still, every couple of weeks, you might get that phone call like, can you come over? You're like, fuck. Yeah, you come over, you stay the night, you get up and leave the next morning. Next thing you know, 2 weeks later, even though you're seeing somebody else, there's that slight overlap until you get to a point where you're like, one of the two people says, yeah, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm with this person. This is over. But there's usually that kind of, or even sometimes it's just a matter of this person has been in your life so long, things happen and you need somebody to tell.
Yeah.
So you tell the person that you were closest to, even though it's not working out.
Yeah, and that was a lot with me and her. Like, we've had a lot of people pass away in her family. Her dad, who was hugely important in her life, he passed away, and that was like really put a number on her. Later on, her aunt suddenly, shockingly died. She had a brain tumor, and their family structure, she was only just a couple years older than my wife. So even though that was her aunt, they were more like sisters because the time gap or age gap wasn't very huge. They both had daughters that were the same age. So, we've been through a lot together. And I think to your point, that's exactly what it was, is sometimes, you just need family.
Yeah.
And people that's, your backstory and aren't going to judge you for it and, things that's happened. And I think that was a lot of what led us back together, because there was no doubt we loved each other. It was just to a point to where it was becoming that Pam and Tommy relationship.
Right.
And, we kind of was seeing each other on and off, and that lasted through Christmas. We seen each other a little bit through Christmas, and fast forward to that kind of went off and on for the next couple months. Then we got to Easter, and at this point, the guy was living with her at her home. He had then moved out. I think in January, he left to go back home and was going to stay home. I'm not sure what happened, and home for him, I think, was Pennsylvania, But something happened, and he didn't wind up staying, and he came back. But when he come back, he didn't live there. Now, he would still come, but he didn't live there. And when it got to around Easter, I was just like, look, if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's give it a shot. Let's put everything we got into it, because it's probably be like one and done. If we don't get it this time, it's probably time to push the chips in. I was like, but he's going to have to go. You're going to have to tell him, you're coming back here. Just tell him, And that was kind of what set everything in motion, because we were together for a whole weekend. We went to her mom's for Easter weekend. We went to Myrtle Beach, stayed up there for like 4 days. And then we come back on a Thursday. Come back on a Friday. And my son had a soccer game the next day on a Saturday. And I was like, all right, well, you're going to tell him, tonight, everything, what was going on. And she's like, yeah, I'll tell him. So at the soccer game, I'm sitting there and she comes up and I was like, well, how did he take it? And he's like, he didn't take it. She said he came in, said his head was killing him. He went straight to bed. Now, this guy was a former vet and he had diagnosed PTSD. So some of the meds that he was on, when he would come home, he would take them and just pass right out.
Right.
And I don't know all the names of the meds and stuff that he was on, but that's generally what would happen. So she said, all right, I'm going to tell him today. And I was like, okay, you let me know what's going on and, just keep me in the loop. If you need me, call me. Let's fast forwards to, I'd say probably about 6 o'clock. She said she told him and he was pissed and he left and he grabbed his dog. He had a service dog. And she's like, but I know he's not gone because he's still got to come back to get all of his stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, you might better go back there because if he sees you here, then he's really going to get pissed. And so this is probably like 8 or 9 o'clock. I'm with some friends of mine around the corner. The same guy, we're going to circle back around to the same guy that I was with the night that my friend shot himself.
Right.
He calls me and he knew what was going on. He knew the situation because he's a good friend of mine. He knew that we had split up. Then he knew we were about to reconcile, but he also knew about the other guy. And he called me and he was like, hey, where you at? And I said, I'm at a friend of mine's around the corner. He knew the guy. His name was Nate. And he said, well, if you come by here and you see the guys, I don't really remember what I want to say his name, but he was like, if you see so-and-so's truck here, don't stop. And I'm like, all right, well, you want to give me a little bit more on that? What's going on? And he said, well, they come riding by. And he said, I went up to the car and was like, hey, guys, what's going on? And he said, I could tell your wife was visibly shaking. And he said, I asked him what's up. And he said, I'm just looking for Chip because when I find him, I'm going to fucking kill him. Now, I didn't know that all this was going on. So I'm trying to call her phone to figure out what's happening. Her phone's going straight to voicemail because I guess when he came back, things got violent. He was punching holes in the wall. He broke her phone, apparently roughed her up a little bit, but I had no way to find all this out because her phone was smashed. So later on, he calls me again and he said, hey, I'm going to have him at my house. He said, if you come by here, it's just going to be him. But he's like, I'm going to try to talk, figure out what's going on. But if you ride by here, just don't stop. I don't want anything going on at my house. I'm like, all right, that's fine. So I go back to my house. I'm just sitting there. I think I was watching like a UFC or something on TV. And my daughter calls me. She worked.
He knows where you live, though, right?
Yeah, he knows. He knew, okay. But my car wasn't at my house. Oh. When they were looking for me, I wasn't home.
Oh, okay.
So had I been home when he was making her drive around looking for me, probably would have stopped by and things would have maybe, who knows how they went at that point in time. But by the time, I get home, this is probably like 12:30 because it's like the main event of the UFC's coming on right then, which is why I went to my house to watch it. So it's probably at least 12:30, 1 o'clock because they come on pretty late East Coast time. And I talked to my daughter. She worked at the Mexican restaurant that I was talking about earlier. I called her. I said, when you get home, let me know your mom's okay. So she gets home and then she calls me from my daughter's phone. She's like, yeah, she's like, he got upset, but she said, Jamie got him. He's at Jamie's house. Don't worry about it. He's going to be staying there. And so I'm thinking, all right, well, he's going to be staying there. They're good. I'm good. So I'm in bed watching the UFC. And then all of a sudden I get a text, but it's from his phone. And he said, hey, are you home? And I text back. I said, yeah, I'm home. And he was like, can me and you talk? And I was like, yeah, about what? And he was like, man, he said, I don't want no drama. I don't want no BS. He said, but I feel like I'm being lied to on certain situations. And he said, I feel like you'll tell me the truth. And he's like, if you want to, we can meet at Jamie's house, which was my friend right down the street. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And so my thinking is if I can diffuse this situation, because obviously he's pissed because he thinks this has been going on while he's there, that he wasn't privy to it, going on. So I'm a pretty smooth talker, and I'm thinking I can diffuse this.
Yeah. And
just think, hey, maybe she just wants to come back home. So we go down there, and that's exactly what it was. He was just saying, I want to know how long you guys have been talking. I was like, well, to start with, that's still my wife, so it's really none of your business how long we've been talking. But to answer your question, like we just decided this both recently. And so it would go from like high tension to back to being nothing at all to, I'd say, fast forward 2 hours. And it was basically like 3 guys sitting in the garage talking,
Right.
just with weird extenuating circumstances.
Right.
But we go to leave, and this is probably like 2:30 by the time we get together there. We're talking probably 4:30. The guy whose house we were at was like, all right, I'm fixing to shut it down. He's like, if you want to stay here, you can stay here. He said, or you get Chip to run you home, whatever you want to do. And I looked at him, and he said, do you care, running me home? I was like, no, I don't care. So we shut the garage, and then he's like, man, I don't know if I want to go home. He said, I know if we go home, we're going to start fighting. And my house from his house is like 6 houses down the other way. And he said, do you care if we go to your house? I'm like, no, I don't care. Because at this point, I didn't perceive this guy as a threat.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to say we were friends, but, I just didn't perceive him as being violent. So we go and we pull in. During the time we were talking in the garage, the story I just referenced to you about the guy that committed suicide came up. Well, I don't know if he was trying to match the story or, to say something similar, but he held up his wrist and he was talking about a bracelet that he had. And he's like, do you know why I wear this? And I'm thinking, no, I would not know why you wear that.
Right.
But I said no. And he told me the story of a guy that he was in service with. He was in the Army, that they were together in combat, and the guy got shot in the head. He was trying to save him, but whatever he did wasn't the proper protocol, and they kicked him out of the Army for it, whatever they call you that. They got a name for it when they
Not dishonorably charged.
I think maybe dishonorably discharged. Maybe that might be what it is. But in actuality, that wasn't even true. I didn't find out later. It was partly true. I didn't find out later till he was never actually in like battle. He was intelligence. He sent a guy into somewhere with his intelligence that got that individual killed, which was what got him booted out, which was why he was diagnosed with PTSD, because it did bother him, which was also the reason why right before him and my wife met, he had just gotten out of a mental institution in Alabama, which she didn't know until much, much later in the relationship. So that was the correlation, but he put it like he was there himself.
Right.
When in actuality, he was kind of behind the scenes. It was still his fault, and you could tell that it bothered him. Like he was crying. He cried in the car. So at that point, I'm really thinking this dude just needs somebody to talk to. Now he's losing, what he thought was his relationship, and, maybe he just needs someone to talk to. So we go in my house, looking around, just talking different things. This is probably 4 o'clock-ish, somewhere along in that neighborhood. We each did a shot. We're talking about different things, and we get on the subject of tattoos. And we were talking about another one of my friends' moms. He's like, well, she's always said, crappy things about people with tattoos. He's like, you're covered in them. Does she ever say anything to you? And I was like, no, she ain't never said nothing to me. I said, I got them all over. And I kind of pulled down my shirt slightly, and he seen this one on my chest. And when he seen it, he reached at the bottom of my shirt and pulled my shirt up to see it. And when he did, he noticed, if you see right here, I got an open heart surgery scar right there.
Okay.
When he seen that scar, he was like, damn. He's like, what happened there? And I said, I had open heart surgery my senior year in high school. And he's like, you had a heart attack? And I was like, no. I said it was something that they knew from birth. It was they called it a VSD, basically a hole in the heart. I said, but my senior year, they were able to tell that the hole was bigger than what they thought. And that if it was going to be repaired, better to be repaired then up under my mom's insurance than to do it later on in life where the complications might be worse.
Right.
So senior year in high school, I missed half my year for getting the heart surgery done. And when he seen that, he was kind of like, you could just tell his whole demeanor kind of just changed. And when people, especially when they've had too much to drink, they do that shit where they like bro hug, and kind of like bear hug you and pick you up. So he done that. And I didn't think much of it at the time that he did it. I just, I'd never been around the guy. I didn't know how he could hold his alcohol. I didn't know how much he had to drink. I know he was drinking at the garage. And then when we got back to my house, he had 2 Land Shark beers. And then we each shared a shot.
Law enforcement often questions him, not because he's suspected of a crime, but because they find him fascinating. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't typically commit crime, but when I do, it's bank fraud. Stay greedy, my friends.
Support the channel. Join Matthew Cox's Patreon.
So he goes to the bathroom and I kind of moved to where my stove is. Now, my kitchen is set up basically like a L. So you have the refrigerator here and a hallway here. After the refrigerator, then you got the stove, and it curves back around the sink. So it's very tight and confined. I'm sitting up against the stove, just, chilling, waiting on him to get out. I actually think I was responding to some messages throughout the night. I even text my wife from my son's phone. I'm just like, hey, everything's good. He's actually with me. We're just talking, trying to make sure everything's good before I bring him back over there. He comes out of the kitchen, or out of the bathroom into the kitchen. He comes straight up to me, and the first thing he does is grabs me and jacks me up. So, of course, my ass goes up onto the stove. I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And he's like, I'm going to fucking kill you. And I'm just like, I thought he was joking for a minute, but then the more I could feel his hand and I seen that look in his eyes, I was like, all right, this dude's not joking. So I was able to get down off the stove. He tries to knee me, bring up his knee. So I turned my body a little bit. He still got me slightly, but he didn't really get it full effect. And I told him, I was like, dude, if you don't get off me, I'm going to shoot you. And he goes back, he cocks back his right hand. And I'll jump back 1 second. Whenever he pulled up that shirt to see that scar, he had to see that I had a gun on me, because that's where it was.
Right.
And I was a CWP carrier. I had been for years. I'd owned guns since I was 18 years old. So it was normal for me to have a gun on me, because I know that was the first thing. It was like, why'd you have a gun? I'm a CWP holder. I always have a gun.
Right.
I'd had it for years. And I've been pulled over with that same gun with those numbers ran. So there's documentation that that's the gun that I carry around. Well, when he swings, he's holding me with his left. He's swinging with his right. He kind of clips my chin, so he doesn't hit it fully. So as his body's turning, he lets go with his hand. So at that point, I step back into the corner, literally in a corner, and he's already coming back at me. And I pulled out and I shot. I thought it was twice. Turns out it was 3 times. I didn't learn that until later. But it's a guy thing, guys will talk junk to each other, maybe via text message or maybe in face-to-face. But when you put hands on somebody, that's another level. And then I don't know this guy really like that. And, with the situation that he just talked about, I obviously know he's got some things going on mentally. He is getting told that, we're getting back together. And then he tells me he's going to kill me. I got to take him at his word.
Yeah. Well, and he's in your house.
Yeah.
It's a bad situation. He's drinking. He's attacking you. And what I always find. So, whenever you hear about a police shooting or they wrestled and people are like, well, they didn't have to shoot him. Well, wait a minute. The officer's armed, so you think, oh, he could have just wrestled with him. No, there's a gun there that can go so badly, so quickly that the moment that person says, hey, I'm going to fight you, and I have a gun, I've got to pull my gun, because the chances that you could get the gun and kill me, and you're the one who's being aggressive, means that I have to stop the situation immediately. I can't get into it's not like we can get into a wrestling match and we're going to break it apart. You're attacking me. I have a gun. I could get shot with my own gun. If anybody's getting shot and I've got a gun, it's going to be you.
Yeah.
You're attacking me.
Yeah.
That's the whole stand your ground.
Yeah. Stand your ground, castle law.
Absolutely. And you're
All
in
that.
my house.
Yeah.
What do you every single step of this situation is just not in his favor.
Exactly.
And he's already telling somebody prior to driving around looking for him, telling people I'm going to kill him. You thought you diffused the situation, goes to your house, and attacks you.
And that was exactly what you just said, because the surgery I mentioned earlier about the back issues, the surgeries that I was having at the time, they would go in and they would basically burn the nerve endings away from the spine. And it would hurt for a couple of weeks, but then after that, you would have pretty good pain relief for about 6 to 8 months, because these nerve endings will reattach themselves. And I had just had this done about a week before this happened. So my mobility was already very limited in this. And plus, this was a big dude.
Right.
He's former military. I mean, he was a big guy. So it was really, I didn't have any choice, because it was when he's telling me that, I got to take him at his word. And at that point, the first thing in my head was one of us ain't coming out of this kitchen.
Right.
And that was just it. And as soon as I shot him, he dropped. I was just, the first instinct was what the fuck just happened? So I put the gun down, picked up the phone, immediately called 911. I didn't touch him. I didn't move anything. I didn't mess with anything. Because at my point in my mind, I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
I've defended myself in my house. Now, the 911 call, which there's portions of it available online, has become a huge point of contention because when I was on the phone, the first thing that I said was, I had a friend of mine in my house. He started hitting me. I had no choice. I had to shoot him. The friend of mine thing got blown real out of proportion because people was like, well, they weren't friends. And I'm just like, I didn't have time to tell the whole fucking story to the 911 operator.
Had to sum it up.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, well, he's dying, but wait a minute. Let me tell you this long story for 20 minutes. It was the first thing that I could think of to get her to there because it wasn't a robber. I didn't want to think he was robbing me.
Right.
But that was the first thing that I said. Yeah, maybe not the best choice of words, but you try being in this situation and coming up with a better explanation to get him there. My main thing is I just wanted him to get there.
Yeah.
And so I talked to the 911 operator, and she's like, how is he? This, that, and the other. Is he breathing? Is he talking? Is he moving? And I'm telling her what he was doing. He never talked. He was making some noises. And she was like, do you have a towel nearby? And I said, yeah, there's one in my bathroom. She said, can you go get the towel and place it over the wounds? I run to the bathroom. I yanked the towel. I yanked the towel so hard off the bathroom wall that it brings the whole damn bracket with it.
Right.
The little bracket to hang your towel. So I go back, I pull up his shirt, and I see two small wounds that looks like if you were to take a pencil and just stab through paper. Very, very small.
Right.
And I put the towel over that, and I hold it till the police get there. Sit there, and she's like, is the door unlocked? I said, yeah. She's like, make sure the gun's unloaded, out of sight. You don't want to have that on you when the cops get there. I'm like, it's on the counter. It's unloaded. I was like, the door's unlocked. They can just come on in, whatever they want to do. And she said, okay, the officer's there. She said, we need you to go outside with your hands up. So I go outside, hands up. They cuffed me, but he doesn't say I'm under arrest. He just said, we got to see what's going on. So he cuffs me, puts me in the car. He was the first officer on the scene. So he goes in and checks everything out. Then there's another officer, and then cops just keep coming. And you'd imagine if something like that happens in one of these streets, and all these streets are filled with cops, every neighbor's, because at this point it's 6:30, 7 in the morning, every neighbor's like looking out the window, what the hell's going on? I'm sitting out there in a cop car in the back seat. There's ambulances there now. There's like the fire EMS is there now. I mean, it's the whole street is packed. And I'm just sitting there waiting, and I see him finally bring him out, and they get in the ambulance, they leave. Still nobody's come to me for anything. Finally, a female cop comes back, and she reads me my rights and asks me if I'm, wants to answer any questions. And I told her, no, not without a lawyer. So that was that part. So I knew they couldn't ask me anything else. I'd say probably another hour goes by, and I'm still in there, and I'm kind of nodding to one of the cops, like telling him to come here. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, dude, I got to go to the bathroom. And he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to hold it. And I was like, no, I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's no holding. It's about to happen. It can happen in this car, in this yard, or in the house. But, like, I got to go. So they let me go, or they took me out. They took me upstairs into my house. And they was like, is there somewhere here you can change clothes? And I'm like, yeah, this is my house. So everything in here is my house. So we go upstairs, change clothes. They take all the clothes that I have on that day, shirt, pants, boots, all that stuff, which is, I guess, common. And I changed clothes, and he asked me if there's anywhere I can go until everything gets resolved. And I'm like, well, yeah, by this time, I mean, people that I knew in that neighborhood were like sitting around the house in golf carts, just trying to figure out what the hell was going on. So I go and I pick one up. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go hang out at your house until they finish. And he's like, all right. So I told him what the address was, and we go over there, and it's like probably 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning at this point. I'm still haven't been to bed yet. I mean, just, adrenaline's still through the roof. And I'm waiting, and he pulls back up. One of the detectives pulls back up, and he's like, are you ready to answer some questions for us? And I was like, well, no, like I said, not without a lawyer. And he's like, well, who's your lawyer? Well, at the time, I was using my divorce lawyer, who was also a former cop. So I told him his name. And he's like, well, I know him. He's like, well, we'll get together Monday morning, and, we'll give you some questions to answer, and we'll go through that. He says, so just look to get with him sometime Monday morning to answer our questions. And I don't know if you're going to come in or write a statement or what. And I'm like, okay. So I said, I'm free to go back home. And they said, yeah, you're free to go. And I was like, what about, is there any mess? And he said, I don't think there's much. He said, but that's not on us to clean up. He said, that's on you. Because all they do is handle the crime scene, and then they leave. It doesn't matter what's left. That is not their responsibility to clean up. Well, by this time, somebody had already called my mom. My mom lives about 2 hours away, so she's there. When I come back, obviously she's hysterical. And when we went in the house, there really wasn't a lot there. Like, there was very, very little blood. so much to the fact that she took like 2 paper towels and just wiped the floor, and then it was done. That was it. So it's not like on TV when you see somebody shoot somebody and the whole wall gets covered in blood. It was not like that at all. Matter of fact, the whole situation while I was there, I never seen blood at all. So the day goes by, get up Monday morning. I think I might have slept a couple hours that night. It was still just, everything was just still 100 miles an hour. So I go to my lawyer's office. We write a statement. We send it to them. They obviously want to talk to my wife. She goes, she gives a statement. Then on Wednesday, I see my lawyer call me, and he's like, hey, I got some bad news. And I'm like, what? And he's like, they're charging you with murder. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know.
Did you ever think that was coming?
No. Especially not after they let me go that morning. I figured I was probably going to have to go to jail. But once they figured out what happened, everything happened, especially with, all the proof there, that they would let me go. That was what I was thinking. But then when they didn't even take me to jail,
you thought I'm never doing it. Yeah, this is they realized what happened.
Yeah, this is clear cut, because the way everything happened in that kitchen, I'll get into this a little bit, but like everything was backed up just by the way stuff happened. So two out of the 3 shots went through and through. One of them hit my refrigerator and then bounced and hit a wall. The other one hit like a 24 pack of water that was sitting beside the refrigerator. The other one struck that. So what that did was that proved that I said I was standing in the corner.
Right.
It proved that I was standing in the corner. Otherwise, you can't get that indentation on that refrigerator to bounce over here if you're anywhere else but where I told you. Also, a shell casing was recovered in the sink, which when you're in that corner, shell casing or sinks to the right, shell casings are ejected to the right and back. So everything was lining up that way. And trust me, I did not have the wherewithal at that time to go start checking all this stuff out, and, measuring stuff and looking for stuff. It was just, I didn't need to lie. I didn't need to tell anything that didn't happen, because everything was the truth, and it was backed up by what I said.
Right.
So he tells me they're going to do that. And I'm just like, dude, I don't really know about you handling this. I was like, no disrespect, but like, if you handled a case like this before? And he's like, well, I've handled a few. He's like, but if you want to look for other options, he's like, that's on you. He's like, I won't get mad or upset. He's like, this is a case that you got to deal with. So I start hanging up the phone and calling people that I know around the area, and I'm like, who's the best attorney for this? And I keep hearing one name over and over and over again. It's Andy Savage. Even from towns where I grew up in Darlington, calling guys there, big shot lawyers, Andy Savage, Andy Savage, Andy Savage. I hear that name probably 10 times. I don't think I heard a different name when I was telling them what was going on. So at this point, it's late in the day on Tuesday. They want me to turn myself in on Wednesday. So it's like, we're talking less than 24 hours here. I got to turn myself into jail. So I called his, they were closed, but you have like a 1-800 number or whatever. You can leave a message and it gets checked. And if it's important enough, then they contact him. Left a message, told him what was going on. He calls me, kind of gets a little gist of it. He said, I don't want to know everything. He said, just give me the broad strokes. When are you supposed to be turning yourself in? I told him, he said, be at my office at 6:30 tomorrow morning. I was like, all right. So me, my wife, my mom, they carried me up there 6:30, and we basically break down the story, kind of just at this point from what we knew, told him everything. And he was like, why are we here? And I was like, your guess is as good as mine, bro. I don't know. Like, they can't even paint this as a jealousy thing, because he wasn't the one. He would be the one that would be the jealous one, not me.
Right.
Like, it's not like this just happened.
Yeah. It's not like he took your wife and you lured him to your house and shot him.
Right.
This is him. He's getting his walking papers.
He's getting the boot. Exactly. And usually 9 times out of 10, you probably know this, whoever's where they're not supposed to be is the one with the problem.
Right.
That's typically how it is. And he was just like, is it an election year? Is somebody trying to make a statement? And I was just like, I don't know. I just know I didn't do anything wrong. So huge amount of money we got to come. Good lawyers are not cheap. If anybody out there that finds themselves in need of an attorney, they're worth every penny, or the right ones could be. Mine was, but they are not cheap. But the reason they're not cheap is, like, as I'm sitting here telling him this stuff, like I'm mentioning names, this, that, and the other, papers are just being printed. Stuff on the guy, on me, on everything, on his military records. I mean, just everything that could be pulled was being pulled like almost verbatim as I'm saying it. Like it was literally, that scene was like something out of a movie, everything that was being done. And he goes and he said, when are you supposed to turn yourself in? I said, today, like in a couple hours at 12 o'clock. And he's like, give me a minute. So he comes back and he's like, all right, I got your, you don't have to go till Friday. He's like, but I'm going to try to get it pushed back till Sunday. He said, I'm telling him I'm taking you on as a client. You know, we need some time to get stuff ready. So basically what he needs from me is he's like, you know, reach out to everybody you know, get some character letters wrote up, you know, talking about who you are, what kind of person you are. He said, we'll present that with to a judge for bond. He's like, typically in situations like this, I like to tell people to just sit in jail for a while and wait and let the heat die down. He's like, but in your case, I don't really see any reason why you should have to do that, because he actually represented, I don't know if you remember the case, but Mark Schlager, where Walter Scott, there was a video of the guy running away and the cop shot him like 9 times in the back.
Was unarmed.
Yeah. Well, there's more to it than that, okay. But my lawyer was Walter Scott's lawyer. Mark Schlager's lawyer. And he actually got him off on the local trial, but then the state come in and he didn't get him off. He got him off on the state, and then the feds come in, and he actually got found guilty in the feds. But so he was. But
that wasn't for murder in the feds. It was for, wasn't it for like violation of his civil right?
It was something along those lines, yeah, because he got, I want to say he got like 17, 18 years. I could be off on the number, but listening to the CSI guy that we wound up getting for my case, done a podcast breaking down like that Walter Scott actually used the taser on Schlager, and which gave him right to be able to fire. Now then you have to tie in, you know, was what all happened before the video got put on, but you can talk for a whole nother show just about that alone. That's craziness. But that was the same guy that represented him. And so we got all the stuff together. We got all the character letters together. And then he wound up getting it pushed back until Sunday. He's like, you don't have to turn yourself into Sunday at 1 o'clock. So I'm like, you know, a couple days.
Yeah. At least you don't have to sit in jail over the weekend.
Yeah. Sit in jail over the weekend. That's a couple days. So we're trying to get everything together. We get I think I got like 65 character letters from different people. I would have had a lot more, but some of my friends are felons, and they're like, I don't know if I should write one. And I'm just like, well, maybe you're right. Just keep your letter. I was like, I appreciate it, but just keep your letter. And so we go in, and everybody comes down to my house like that weekend. So I don't want it to sound like we weren't care. It was almost like a party,
right?
Like going away party, kind of. Like everybody come, we eat. You could tell there was like an uncomfortableness amongst everybody, but it was kind of like, you know, just in case something goes wrong, if they do decide to keep me or whatever reason, it was just one last time everybody's getting together. So we get together, we eat, everybody hangs out, and then Sunday morning, me and my wife got in the back of the car, and my mom and stepdad took me to jail and dropped me off, and you know, I hugged everybody before I went in because I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, getting bond for murder is not an easy thing.
Right.
A lot of times you don't get bond for murder. You have to stay in for a while. So it was I went in there not really knowing what was going to happen. I go in and sit down on the bench. I'd never been arrested before, mind you. I want to make this clear. I'm not somebody that's a frequenter of the county jail. I've never been arrested before in my life. And so, but this was a big one to go in there for. And I sit down on the bench, and there's this guy, and you could tell he was like an old biker guy or whatever, you know, probably had a little bit too much to drink. And he's like, bench of shame, huh? I was like, yeah, guess you could say that, you know, 'cause I'd always been told, you know, just don't talk. Just stay quiet, stay to yourself. So he says that, and they fingerprint us and, excuse me, do all that good stuff, take us to the holding room, and he sits by me, and he's like talking. And then they come to see the magistrate. Well, I already knew that with my charge, a magistrate couldn't grant me bond. I had to go in front of the circuit court. Well, they take me, another younger kid, that guy, all to the room. Now we're handcuffed, wrist to wrist, ankle to ankle, having to shimmy down the hall, and one by one, my last name's Williamson, so I'm always going to be last in everything they call. The first kid was like possession of marijuana. You know, PR bond, he goes, that was DUI, second offense. You'll have to get somebody to bail you out, yada. Stand, Mr. Williamson, you'll be in charge of murder and a violent crime. And when he said that, the guy that I've been talking to this whole time, he's just like, and he just kind of start scooting down away. So I was like, you know, yes, sir, I know I have to see the circuit court. We go back into the room. He immediately comes straight in, picks the stuff where it was at, goes to the opposite corner of the room. Don't say nothing else to me the rest of the time.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I was like, well, at least I can get some little peace and quiet here.
Yeah.
But that didn't last very much long either. Because this is like the holding tank, as people are getting arrested. Everybody goes into this tank until it starts to get full, and then they'll start dispersing you out into the pods of the prison. But I knew I had court the next morning at 9 a.m., so I'm still in street clothes. And we have court, 9 a.m. They come and get me. And I'm in a room with all, like, people that have been there for a while. One guy had just set his sister on fire. He's waiting to see the circuit court judge. And that's the thing is, like, you have to see the circuit court. The circuit court rotates throughout the county. So if I'd have went in there and they would have been in another county, say Dorchester County, I'd have had to wait till they rolled back around to my county, which was Berkeley County. Luckily, they were in Berkeley County that week, so I didn't have to wait. I was able to literally go to court for it the next day. So I caught a break on that. He's in there, like I said, he set his sister on fire. He comes back in happy, smiling because he only got 14 years because he could have got 30. Another guy's in there saying how he's going to go to Atlanta he's going to tell the cops he's going to testify against somebody to get him locked up, but he's really going to Atlanta because Atlanta's prisons got better food, and he'll get better food for a couple of weeks because the prison food where I guess we were at here was horrible. One other guy's in there talking about how if he sees another guy and so in the court, he's going to kill him right there. I mean, I'm listening to all this being said, and I'm just like, geez, I'm saying to myself, like,
So I'm
Jesus
surrounded by
Christ.
some real fucking derelicts.
Yeah, like these are some real fucking dudes. Like there's no bullshit in here. And I'm just sitting there, and I was like, I hope nobody asked me like what I'm in here for. And sure enough, one of them was like, what you in here for? Family court? And because they were all in like the jumpsuits, and I'm in regular street clothes.
Right.
So I'm in like, yeah, something like that. And then one guy knew. He was like, you're the kid from Cane Bay. And I'm just like, I kind of looked at him. I was like, yeah. He's like, we got TVs in here. We see the news just like everybody else. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. He's like, you got a lawyer? And I said, yeah. And he was like, who? And I said, Andy Savage. He was like, you all right. And again, it's the first time I'd ever met this dude. I never needed a lawyer before, but everybody knows this guy's name. So we go in there. They finally called me up. I'm in there for, God, what seemed like an hour. And the walk from the county lockup where you're at in the holding to get to the courtroom is like underground, like a dungeon. So, I mean, like we're walking through there, and I'm just, every horror movie's playing in my head, like, dum, 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 dum. I mean, it was just really, really scary looking. So we get over there. We go in. Massive courtroom. I mean, huge flags, everything. The courtroom's packed full of people. I just never been anything like this in my life. So I go, shoot me over to my lawyer. Their lawyer for the state's arguing that I shouldn't be given bond, that I'm a danger to the community, yada, yada, yada. My lawyer's saying, look, this guy's never been in trouble. He's had a good job. He's an upstanding member of his own community. Everybody knows him. So they fight back and forth. Well, any court show that I've ever seen, when a judge makes a ruling, she makes it right then. Either bond granted or bond denied.
Right.
So I'm waiting, and she goes, okay, I'll make my decision and let you guys know. Bam! And hits the gavel. And I'm just like, well, that's not what I was planning on. So I looked at my lawyer. I was like, what the fuck does that mean? He's like, I guess that means she'll let us know.
Yeah.
And so they're automatically like taking me off. I'm looking back kind of like, whisper mouthing to my family. I love y'all. I seen all them in the back. So they're taking me back to the room, and you got to get on this thing where they, rearrange your cuffs and put it back like you were. And I asked the guy, I was like, so what does that mean she'll get back with me? Like, what does that mean exactly? And he's like, she'll probably have you an answer in a week or so. And I'm like, a week or so? What the fuck? And so we get back in, and I'm just like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I thought they were supposed to give you an answer right then. So I called my wife on the phone after about an hour or two from jail. And I was just like, all right, what the fuck is going on? And she said, well, she's already made her decision. She's going to give you bond. She's like, but they might not process the paperwork until tomorrow, so you might have to stay in there another night. And I'm just like, all right, well, if I got to, I can do another night. I didn't really sleep much anyway. And so I was like, all right, I can do another night if need be. She said, but you may still get out. I don't know. I was like, all right. So this is like 3, 4 in the afternoon, like 9, and people are still getting out throughout this time. That paperwork process takes a while. So 7, 8, 9 o'clock, people are still getting out. Hey, you going home? Hey, you going home?
But you're pretty much thinking I'm staying the night.
I was hoping, but I was planning on staying the night. But I just figured nobody would come for me if I wasn't getting out, because when they come, it's usually to say, hey, you're getting out.
Yeah.
So about 9:30, I'm
They don't
up
come
on
in
one
to
of the-
say, we're just checking on
Yeah.
you. Just making sure you're okay.
Yeah,
Or you're
need
in a good
anything?
space.
room service, anything?
Yeah. They're not real concerned about you.
So no, and the guy, and I'll mention this really quick. The guy, the biker guy was in there. I swore I thought this dude was going to die right there in the cell. He had asthma, and they refused to give him his inhaler. And this dude, I mean, he looked like he was trying to breathe air through a flattened straw.
Yeah.
I mean, and every time he would ask about it, they would say, "Okay, we'll look into it. We'll let you know." I was
they'll
just
let
like,
you die.
Yeah. I was like, this
I've known
dude
guys
is going to fucking die if they don't give him something.
Yeah.
You seen people that's happened to?
From exactly that. Asthma. They wouldn't give him his inhaler. They said, oh, the next day, it'll be tomorrow. He's like, no, you don't understand. I'm not a, whatever, there's different classifications. He's
Yeah.
like, if I don't have it, I'll die. They were like, yeah, well, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Go back to your fucking cell. Like, they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, that night, he died.
Wow.
Woke up the next day, dead. I guess he didn't wake up the next day dead.
Yeah.
His cellie woke up the next day, and he was dead.
Wow. That's crazy. But yeah, so 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, they open up the door, Williamson. So I'm like fucking stoked. I'm like, shit, they got it done. I'm out of here. I hop down, get there, and as crazy as it is, the guy looked at me and he's like, you're Leah's dad, right? And Leah's my stepdaughter. And I'm just like, yeah. And he's like, my wife used to train her for gymnastics. And I was like, oh, how you doing? I mean,
Glad we could catch up.
yeah, fancy meeting you here. And I was like, I'm getting out of here. And he's like, no, we got to transfer you. And I'm like, transfer me? Where? And he's like, to the pod. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be getting out like in the morning. Like I've already got bond. He's like, doesn't matter. He's like, it just goes by the order of who was here. He's like, you're the next one to go. And I'm just like, well, son of a bitch. So they take me, they swap me out, they give me the jumpsuit, flip flops, the little bag, cup, 3-in-1 body wash, shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, roll of toilet paper, and send you in. So you go in, and the one I was in, it was like a big open area room with like those chairs that everything on it are round. There's no sharp points on them chairs at all. And a TV, and then you got a bottom floor and a top floor. Yeah. Well, then when you go in there, it's basically like just an open dorm. There's bunks in there, but it's just open from one end of the wall to the other. So a lot of people in here. So I'm walking. I'm like, all right, well, I'm probably not going to find the bottom bunk. Walk to one end, come back, and then I see the guy that set his sister on fire. And kind of like waves at me. And I'm just like, hey, I was like, care if I get up there? He's like, nah, man, go ahead. So I hop up there, and, still at this point, I'm just like, Jesus, I'm staring at the ceiling. I was like, I can't believe I'm here. Like I've done nothing wrong. I've done everything from the training they give you for your CWP, by the letter of the law, by castle law. Like I've done everything by the letter of the law, and I'm still in here, and it was blowing my fucking mind. And, I would talk a little bit. One guy come up to me, I guess he was kind of like one of the top orderlies or something. He's like, do you need a job? And I was like, all right, now, wait a minute.
But I'm not going to be here long
Yeah,
enough for
and
a
that's
job.
when I was like, nah. He's like, oh, you bonding out? And I said, yeah, I'm supposed to get out of here tomorrow. And he was like, all right, well, if you ain't getting out that quick, don't worry about it. Well, then somebody else, I guess they knew the guy that knew what I was in there for.
Yeah, that'll spread everywhere. Everybody within 2 days, everybody, 150 guys, every one of them knows.
Yeah, well, they knew that night. And the one guy, he said, man, let me ask you something. He's like, you said you didn't need no job. And I was like, yeah. He's like, you're bonding out tomorrow? He's like, what fucking lawyer you got? He's like, I need him. And I was just like, Andy Savage. He's like, okay, I understand. That just kept coming up throughout there. And I am heavily tattooed. I got a lot of tattoos on my arms and stuff. And the guys were noticing that in there, and they asked me who my tattoo artist was. And he was a local guy with like everybody in there knew him. And he was like, oh, I know Eric. So it was kind of like, that was like, I guess my in. They didn't mess with me, or treat me like, any type of way. And so I'm not going to say it was like, obviously I'd have rather been in my own bed, but it wasn't like a bad experience.
Yeah,
like it wasn't like, they were in there trying to fuck with you or anything like that. And I mean, that was pretty much it. Spent that night there, got out the next morning, immediately went home, took a shower. And there's a funny story about that too. That night I did decide to take a shower. And the guy, I didn't want to make it seem like I'd never been in there before. And the guy's like, he's like, you know how to work the shower, right? He's like, with the little thing in the back. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I go in there, and it's like you push it, and the thing only lasts for like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But they have something to where they can jam in there to where it don't. Well, I couldn't figure out how they done it, but I'm not about to go out there and ask them.
Yeah.
So I was having to take like miniature showers within 5 second increments to get somewhat clean. But I was just like, yeah, I'm not telling them that I don't know how to work this. Everybody up in there assumed, I think, that I'd been in there before. And I didn't do anything to correct them on that either. I was just like, well, if they're going to assume that, let me get out of here.
So it was the push button, and they had a tab that you could
it was
jam
like
it in there.
a real thin piece of plastic that you could jam in there, and it kept it from coming back.
Yeah, because otherwise you hit it and then it slowly slides back out.
Yeah. Dudes in prison, man, are some of the smartest cats you will ever run across.
Listen, the necessity is the mother of invention. Like
exactly.
Those guys, like if you'd been in a place where like you need to get somebody wants some coffee 5 cells down and you're all locked up, man, they'll take their thread and make a thread and take something heavy and shoot it down there. It'll bounce off the wall, and the next guy will get it, and he'll slide it down. Next thing you know, you've got a string back and forth, and they're pulling fucking little bags of coffee back and forth to each other. It's insane. You're like, who thought that up? Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the one dude, he said he didn't like the cold air blowing on him, so he would wet like toilet paper and throw it up to block the cold air. Yeah, I mean, it was just...
Yeah, COs get pissed. They come in, they get it down, they yell at you, tear your bed apart, and you'll just rebuild. It's just what we do. So, yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, that was the extent of the experience. You know, it wasn't bad. It wasn't, anything like people, I guess, think the worst case scenario. It wasn't that, but granted, I was only in there a couple of days, so thankfully I didn't have to put any more experience in that than I had to. But I got out, and then immediately then, the lawyer's like, all right, here's what we got. We're going to plan a preliminary hearing for you. And this took place in July, so a couple months after.
You still working? You're still going to work?
Well, no, yeah, I guess I should cover that. I get out because I'm only in jail. Like I said, I check myself in Sunday. I get out Tuesday morning. I go to work, and I tell them, like, hey, I'm not going to need to miss work. I'm coming back. But obviously they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I go out there, and he's like, all right, well, come over and go to the GM's office. So when he said that, I'm like, oh, boy. So we go to the GM's office, and it was like my boss in my department, the GM of that new corps. And he sat down, and he's like, all right, well, what's going on exactly? And I told him everything, and he's like, well, unfortunately, man, we're going to have to let you go. And I was just like, what the fuck? I was like, after everything I just told you, he's like, yeah, I can't imagine the shoes you're in right now. And I'm like, well, imagine being fired on top of it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're not helping out in the situation. I can promise you that. I'm like, I'm not going to need to miss work. Like, I'm out. I'm free to come to work. And they even blocked me from getting unemployment. It said it was conduct detrimental to New Corps' off-work conduct policy. They blocked me from even getting unemployment. I couldn't even get unemployment from after I got fired.
What people? That's some shit. Okay.
But the silver lining to me getting fired was that then I could access the 401k that I had built up.
Yeah, but you would think after they. Well, anyway, let's keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, there can be a lot said on that. I mean, I was just like, I know people that have worked there that have had charges that not necessarily maybe what I had, but were serious, serious charges that never got anything done to them. And I'm just like, why wouldn't you let me keep working? Like, obviously, if I'm found guilty, you're not going to have to worry about firing me.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to be back for a very long time. But for whatever reason, they just wanted to go ahead and get rid of me. And that's what they did. And so, like I said, with them firing me, it did open me up to be able to go into my 401k. Because as long as you're employed there, other than it being, I think you can do a loan, but you can't withdraw, like make big withdrawals.
Right.
But, you're going to have to pay your taxes. But after you no longer work there, you're free to do whatever. And so the prices for the lawyer was like $50,000 to take the case, then like another 10 or 15 to start all the investigations and stuff like that. And that was just off the rip. So I go ahead, I pay that off in full. I think I finished paying off my car I had at the time, maybe a little bit of credit card debt. That way I didn't have any debt, and it was just a house payment, normal bills, and my wife was still working. So we could manage if it was going to be a while before I could find another job, because I didn't know what that was going to be like either. So I'm handling the lawyer situation, but I'm also trying to find a job, and I go to Republic Services, which is like a trash company. But so I'm a welder, so I was going to be at their facility where they would cut out panels that had been rusted out or dented in, put in new ones and weld them up. It was good money, close to the house, good benefits. And I told the guy in the interview, I'm like, hey, this is what happened. And he's like, when did all this happen? I'm like, a week ago. And he's like, oh, shit. And he's like, well, I took criminal justice in college. He said, don't sound like you have anything to worry about. And I was like, well, I'm cool. I'm just letting you know if I say, hey, I got to go for a court hearing, you know why. Or if you see something in the news, you know why. because it was still in the news. Like when I got home from jail, there was 2 news stations sitting across from my house. I guess they knew I was getting out, so they were just waiting. So it was a big story, especially in that community. It's just one of them things where it just don't happen,
Right.
especially in those communities. So everybody was on it. There was countless articles on it. So when I come home, I was telling my wife, I'm like, I think I got a job. Well, when it run through corporate in Arizona and they run the background, it showed as a pending murder investigation.
Right.
And they called me and they rescinded the offer.
Right.
So I'm just like, well, fuck, there you go. I can't go anywhere that's going to run my background.
Right.
And I found a sign company that was hiring at the time. Because it was in such quick succession, I just told the guy, I didn't tell him I got fired. I told him that I wanted to be able to get off a night shift and be able to be more hands-on with my son, which wasn't a lie. I did, but I just kind of got forced into that.
Right.
And so he didn't run my background. He hired me on the spot because he seen that I'd had a long work history. I was with them for like 15 years, through two different two different branches, like 7.5 years in Columbia, another 7.5 years up here. So he hired me immediately, and I loved that job. It was fun. It was building signs. Like, I had no idea there was much money in that. Like, every business has to have some sort of signage. So those guys make bank. And so it was fun. And I done that for a little while. But after this preliminary hearing, we had nothing else. Nothing else happened. No other events. And in the preliminary hearing, you can't divulge evidence in a preliminary hearing. So the only thing that can be presented is why you charge someone.
Right.
That's it. And she wasn't giving any reason of why she charged me. And in the preliminary hearing, she lied like 5 different times.
District attorney.
No, this is the detective over my case. It was a female. She lied 5 times in the preliminary hearing. Like that we can document, not just I'm saying, well, that's a lie. Like she said that there was a point one time to where me and my wife were, fighting a little bit. And they said that there was a report wrote up to where she said that he answered the door and he was holding a gun and a knife. I'm just like, well, how does somebody answer a door holding a gun and a knife? What was in the report was that my wife came over and she said there was a gun on the table. Now, this is before everything happened.
Right.
But there was usually a gun somewhere around close. Like, I'm a gun enthusiast. I have a lot of guns. I've got 38s, 9mm, SKSs. I mean.
But they only mentioned the knife.
Yeah. Well,
so the report only mentioned the knife.
Well, she said gun and a knife in lieu of I was holding them. Like I answered the door holding a gun and a knife. I was like, how the fuck do you answer a door holding a gun and a knife? Then there was other reports to where the guy it was come out later that he was on steroids. He actually took steroids that night. He took 2 vials of, I don't know, whatever you call it. I'm not into steroids, obviously, as you can tell by his physique. But he took 2 vials of something. Well, they collected those vials from the house where my wife was staying at. Well, she said, we only collected 1 vial. It's in her report that she wrote that she collected 2 vials.
Right.
So minuscule, but it's still a lie. She said that he was really distraught after this happened, that he locked himself out of the house when he come outside for the arresting officer or for the first officer on scene. That never happened. The door was open. I don't know. It was almost like she was just fabricating little things to make it seem worse. Then she said, my lawyer was like, well, have you ever known him or any reports to him being a violent person? And she said, yes. And he was like, what? Yeah, well, tell me. And he said he wasn't allowed to go to the school to pick up his child because he and his wife were having arguments and he was banned from going to the school. I'm sitting there looking, I was like, she's a fucking liar. Like, this has never happened. We go and we interview the principal, and the principal's like, no. He's like, if anybody bans anyone from this school from coming and picking up someone, it's me. Nobody has that authority. And he's like, I don't even know if I've ever met the man. He said, I've seen him, but we've never really formally met. And he said, I've never went and told him that he couldn't be here. And he said, if I'd done that, there would have to be some sort of documentation as to why and, reasoning and stuff like that.
So
what
I
was
going to say, she just manufactured the whole thing?
Well, not quite, but what it was, there was a school resource officer that was there. And I guess in one of these times when me and my wife were arguing back and forth, I think it was over something about how much money we were going to be doing, child support. We were trying to figure out the logistics of it. This is before, obviously, the incident happened. The resource officer overheard my wife and another lady talking. The resource officer went and wrote up something My wife didn't even know because she spelled her name wrong on the report. And when I told my wife about it, I'm like, did you fucking write a report on me? And she's like, no. We went and found out that it was her, the school resource officer wrote the report, which even that didn't have anything in it saying that, I was violent or anything like that. And what it was it said that, overheard her and her husband was arguing a possible situation that could come to the school. Like she was just basically doing it as something to document that this is something that could happen down the road.
Right.
The detective took that and rolled with it and was like, he wasn't allowed to come to the school.
Yeah, it doesn't say that at all.
Yeah, it doesn't say that at all. And then we had to print. So like I said, it's like 5 or 6 things that she lied about by herself just in that. And I mean, I don't know logistically, I don't know if that's considered a trial, but like you can get in trouble for that, for lying under oath
But
on
they
a murder
don't.
trial. Yeah, but they don't.
They never do.
Yeah, they never do. Well, one thing that I will circle back, one quick thing. There was, like I said, I told you, I fired 3 shots. 2 went through, 1 didn't. So obviously if you got 2 exits, then you should find 2 bullets somewhere in the house. 1 struck the refrigerator, like I told you. The other one, they hit the water. Mm-hmm. I found that when I got out of prison or jail.
Right.
We had to call them to like, hey, we found a bullet like that obviously y'all didn't find. So that was a real bad look for her,
Right.
not finding that other bullet. And that was, I think, kind of like the first thing is, how bad did you really botch this whole case? And after that, there was really no movement, man, nothing. Like we got...
So the preliminary hearing was held to see if the charges can hold up. And the judge could, at that time, say, you don't have enough.
Mm-hmm. And she almost did. At the end of it, she said, there's really not a lot here, but she said, given the circumstances, I'll bind it to trial. And that's what my lawyer said. He's like, we were this close from getting it dropped right here. And that was it. Like I said, after we left there, we didn't hear, I kept getting reports in. We hired a forensics guy out of New York. His name is John Palucci. He come down and they basically set up, like if you see on CSI, like the beans. So he went to where the wall, back to the refrigerator, back to the corner. So it proved where I was standing, like scientifically proved that I was standing where I was standing. That was big. The angle of the bullets was coming into question because the pathologist had wrote in her report that the angle of the bullet didn't line up to like how I said I was standing. And the reason for that is like one entry point was high, but the other one was a little bit lower. So they're like, well, that doesn't make sense if y'all are in front of each other.
Well, it does if the guy's bent forward.
Exactly.
If he's headed coming toward me.
And I'm assuming you're not a pathologist, but even you knew that.
So if he's tilted and coming toward you.
Exactly. And the way she wrote it in the report was like, well, these stories don't line up. And another thing in the report, they said, well, he said there was a struggle in the beginning until the shooting happened, but we seen no signs of a struggle. So he went back and he looked at the first officer's body cam footage, and there was like a knocked over shot glass on the floor, another knocked over shot glass on the stove, and another like rocks glass, like almost like that coffee mug there without the handle, that you drink whiskey out of. It was knocked over in the back corner. So obviously 3 knocked over glasses you would think would be signs of a struggle.
Right.
And then another big reason was she said there was no back spatter on me. Now, back spatter, even though it sounds like it would come out of the back, it's actually what comes back towards you when you shoot. So if I shoot you here, the back spatter would be what would fly back to me. And because there was none, they said that they questioned whether I was really in as close proximity as I was. But the thing is, he was wearing 3 layers of clothes. He was wearing 3 shirts. He was wearing like a T-shirt, a shirt over that, and then a long sleeve shirt over that. So the chances of you getting back spatter over 3 layer of clothes is damn near non-existent.
Right.
And then at the end it said he claimed to do life-saving measures, but there was no sign of that either. He didn't have any blood on him from that either. And that's why I made that point earlier. I never seen blood.
Right.
Like there was not, at one point this whole time while I'm on 911, while I'm sitting there with him, while I got the towel, I never seen blood.
Right.
Never
and
seen
you
a drop of it.
You did put the towel on him like you were told to do.
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking, I was like, how the hell did they think that towel got there? I mean, like when the guy comes in, he's laying in the kitchen and the towel's right there on him. Like there's nobody else in the house. I'm the only one that could have did it. And, that was pretty much what they built their case on. And that was what our CSI guy basically debunked everything that they gave. He gave a reason to debunk it. And pretty much for 4 years almost, nothing happened with it. And a lot of that was due to COVID. They did reach out to my lawyer and asked if they wanted to do a trial through Zoom. And he said, no, that's not how he works, which I was glad with that. He's a theatrical guy. You know,
Right.
He uses the courtroom as his
Stage.
his
Yeah,
stage. Yeah. So, I was fine with that. And by this time I did land another job. I stayed with the sign company for a while. When COVID hit, they let a lot of people go. And then I found another job that I'm still at now that I love. I've actually made my way up to supervisor now. That guy knows about everything. He's from Texas. And the issue was with the sign places, I never told them. So get this, I'm there like 3 months. I said, oh, we got a big job, a LED sign for a company. I was like, oh, really? Where's that? Nucor. That's the place I used to work.
Yeah.
Everybody there knows. I'm like, oh, shit. I was like, do I need to go on this install? And they're like, no, you don't need to go. I'm like, all right. Because, the dude was nice, but it's just like probably the type of guy to where if I told him exactly what happened, he's like, oh, well, we don't need you here. The job just got filled. And so I'm nervous as hell. And so they go out there, and sure enough, one of the guys they're talking to, he's like, oh, yeah, we got one of our guys at our shop that he used to work out here. What's his name? Wade. Something. My actual first name is Wade. He's like, Wade. Oh, yeah, I know him. How's everything go? Did he beat that case? What case? Well, he killed a guy. He was arrested for it. What? You serious? So then everybody knew, and everybody found out. Now, the owner never said anything to me, but I think by that time he had seen that I was a good worker, that I wasn't a deviant or anything like that. A bad guy. I always come to work. I was always cutting jokes, making people laugh. So he never said anything, but I know he knew because sometimes we would have to go on jobs where you would require to have your background run, like military bases and stuff like that. And when those jobs come up, I never got picked to go on those jobs. So he knew, he just didn't tell me he knew.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, when COVID hit, they let me go, and which they did quite a few people. And when I was at the job I'm at now, I just went and told him up front, I was like, look, dude, I damn near got an ulcer at my last job, not knowing like if he was going to find out what he was going to do. If every day I was going to walk in and be like, why didn't you tell me this? I'm like, so I'm just telling you this right now up front. If you want me, this is what I got coming with me. This is the baggage. And he's like, dude, I'm from Texas. He was like, you didn't do anything that I wouldn't have done. And I'm just like, all right, cool. And so just doing that was like a weight off me, like a tremendous weight that he knew, and I didn't have to worry about hiding anything. And, I worked there, and I still work there now. And in the process of the COVID, I started my own podcast, which we talked about earlier. You were a guest on my show. And the reason I think there's no other quicker way to get somebody to learning about the law if you're in the middle of shit.
Yeah.
Legally. And so immediately I go to, all right, Wrongful Conviction podcast. So I check out Central Park 5, Russ Faria, a bunch of different cases. That leads me to true crime. Then I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of cool. I'd never listened to podcasts before then. And then I just decided to do my own, and it kind of grew legs and took off. So, because I'm a real social person. Like, I like to talk to people, and being on house arrest, that doesn't work very well.
Right.
You're stuck. But being able to do it through Zoom still gives me my availability to talk to people and talk to all different kinds of people and different subjects. And there come to a point where I had to go to New York. So I called my lawyer, and I'm like, look, we ain't heard nothing from these guys from years. Like, I think one thing, they did have a prosecutor that was over my case. He left, so they hired a new person. It was a woman. She only stayed for like 6 months. Then she left. Then they had a newer guy in there. So there was that may have delayed it a little bit. But he just told me, he was like, look, he said, if you're good, the more time that goes by, the better it is.
Yeah.
Because things get lost, people move, people die, whatever. A lot of shit can happen in there. And I'm just like, okay, well, I'm happy. But when it got to the point where I needed to go to New York, I was just like, look, I'm getting kind of tired of this shit hanging over my head, because that's a heavy weight.
Yeah.
To not know if you're going to have to go to trial or jail because that's essentially life. 30 years at my age, that's pretty much life.
Right.
And I was like, we got to tell them either shit or get off the pot here. So they gave me permission to go to New York in July. I went. I needed to go back in September to do another show with a guy up there. Went and done that. And then finally, this past November, the lawyer calls and he said, hey, what you doing? I'm like, I'm working, man. What you doing? He's like, Just figured I'd call a free man. And I'm just like, are you serious? It's dropped? He said, yep, case dismissed. And what did it was after that second trip to New York, the new prosecutor or solicitor that was over there, I think it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
The new one agreed to have a meeting. He sent him an email. He's like, hey, we've been on this almost 5 years. He's like, here's where we're at. And he was like, I'll get familiar with it and get back to you. And so we had a meeting to where we all went to the police station. I kind of gave my story to him there. They played a PowerPoint, which is everything I was just explaining to you about, the knocked over glasses. They had it all highlighted. Right. Like they made it very easy for you to see what's going on.
The forensics
and all that.
Like we're going to tear you apart in court.
Yeah. And then they came to the house. So I had the prosecutor, solicitor come to the house with one of his other guys, a crime scene guy from the police. They all come to the house, and seeing it in the picture in person paints a very good picture of how it went down, because this is not a wide kitchen by any means. You're already in a compact area. So the fact that if somebody's laying stretched across the floor, if you stand them up, like their full body length, and he's maybe, 5'8", 5'9", something like that, there's not a lot of room to be had. Now if you were laying up against the refrigerator, that's one thing, but he wasn't. He was still probably a good 6 inches to a foot away from it. So I think seeing that really put it in perspective for him that, like you said, if we go to court, we're going to get fucking annihilated.
Right.
And not long after that, they dropped it. And I want to say hats off to that prosecutor for even doing that. Because he even told me, he said, this is very rare. He said, most prosecutors don't do this. He said, so the fact that he's coming out here to do this is, something special. He said, but at the same time, it's a risk because we're showing him everything we have.
Yeah.
So he can go and say, all right, well, they got this. We need to, do whatever. But luckily it all worked out. And finally, after 4 years, 9 months, it finally got dismissed at basically the 31st of October.
Nice. That's fucking, honestly, you'll probably die about 5 years earlier. Though.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Probably 10.
Yeah.
Because, that's what I'm thinking, and it doesn't even stop at me. My son, every grade he goes up, see, I don't know how it is here, but, we have schools in these communities.
Yeah.
All the insider schools are. So, obviously, you got Facebook,
schools right down the street. Yeah. A block away.
So, you got that. Then you got Facebook and all these parents and everything. So, every year somebody goes, oh, yeah, I know your dad's the one that shot somebody.
Yeah.
Every year he has to go through that. And there was a period of time, it was about halfway in between this, I own a Siberian Husky. And my neighbor has not my immediate neighbor, the neighbor of my neighbor, had a pit bull. This dog was notorious for getting out and biting people.
Right.
And I come home one day from work and it had jumped the fence and messed my pit bull up. Bad.
Your pit bull?
No, my husky. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The pit bull messed my husky up. So we had to take him to the doctor. He wasn't in fear of dying, but he was messed. He was bleeding from a lot of different places. It messed him up good. He couldn't walk for 2 or 3 days. And so I was super pissed. I was she came over to the house and was trying to apologize. I'm I don't want to fucking talk to you. It had already bit my son a year previous. Now, when I say bit, it was like a nip.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, and I didn't say too much about it, but I did say he's not going to go back down there because it was a situation where they were playing basketball, and I was like, well, maybe the dog was just playing and it just, bit a little too hard. But I just told him, I'm like, hey, don't go down there no more. But this was different. This dog now had jumped in my yard and done this. So somehow or another, the news got wind of it. And they contacted me and I was like, hey, we want to come out and do a report on this dog bite. And I'm just like, well, yeah, that's fine. And I said, but I don't want to be in the report. I was like, I wasn't home. My daughter was. She was the one that was there in the thick of it. If you want to talk to somebody, she'd be the one to talk to. Just because I didn't want to put my face out there with something else. So they do that. The report gets done. And then somebody on Facebook shares it. And then this lady comes on and she's like, well, I'm not sure how, but she said, I'm pretty sure this girl is related to the guy that shot a man in his house.
Right.
And got away with it. And somebody was like, well, how would you know that? She said, I'm a public defender for Berkeley County. She said, he shot the man in his house, claimed self-defense, but she said there's a lot of evidence that doesn't support that. Then he went and hired the best attorney in Charleston to try to beat it. He said, I wish him luck, but the evidence isn't in his favor. This is on Facebook. And she's a public defender.
Like an asshole, right?
And I didn't say anything.
And certainly
even as a public defendant, like the likelihood that she's actually gone down, looked at the case, like she may have been around the water cooler, and the other public defender said, "Well, it doesn't look good for him," or some bullshit. But the fact that she went down, looked at all the evidence and everything else, like that's highly unlikely.
Yeah, and then later on, somebody even said, "Well, if this is your job, and like maybe you shouldn't be on here putting shit like this on Facebook," and she was like, "Well, yeah, I may have said some things that probably shouldn't have been said on such a public forum, but I've had a few cocktails. It is what it is." And I'm just like, what the fuck? And I can't say anything. It's burning me up inside. I can't say anything.
I've had a few drinks, so I get to accuse someone of murder.
That's what the lawyer told me. He's like, you cannot go at people on this Facebook. He's like, let them say what they're going to say. They're going to say it. He said, if you go at them, it'll become worse. And he's like, just don't respond. So for 4 years, I never responded to anybody. And anytime there's like a firework or a gun, or somebody thinks it's a gunshot, the neighborhood is backed up to some open land, so there is hunting that goes on. Anytime anybody hears like a gunshot, for some reason my name always gets brought up.
Right.
And it's a lot of people now are gone that were here then, so they're like, "Oh, there was a murder. What happened?" And the situations that people come up with, "Oh, a guy caught his wife in bed with another woman and he shot the guy." I'm just like, that is fabricated as fuck. Like, that's not even true.
People are scumbags.
I'm like, we were living in different houses. Like, why would I? I was just like, it was so frustrating.
But so she moved back in. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you're still together. Mm-hmm. Everything worked out.
Still together, going strong. Like I said, that the whole thing was we were getting back together anyway.
Yeah.
That was the step. This happened in the middle of it. So obviously, it kind of put a lot of pressure on us. And I mean, it still put a lot of pressure on us because, it's not been easy for me, man. I mean, there's a depression aspect of it. There's a worry. I mean, it's basically like for 4.5 years, I contributed to saying if I went to see if I had cancer, and I've been waiting to see the results for 4.5 years.
Right.
Because essentially this would be terminal, like I wouldn't get out of prison. And it's not like they even charged me with anything less. Like they went straight to murder, not involuntary or whatever. Now the lawyer thought that they may probably try to plea it down because you can always go down, you just can't go up.
Yeah, I assume that they would have come to you at some point and made some kind of offer like, hey, manslaughter, something like that. But they never even made an attempt.
No. Well, I told him if they did, I was like, you tell them no fucking way.
I'm going to trial.
Like you find me 12 people from South Carolina that disagree with what I did, then I guess I'll go away and have some free meals for a while. But I just don't think you can do it.
No.
Not with everything laid out there. And that's what people say, were you nervous? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm nervous because I'm in this situation. I was like, but as far as like the evidence speaking for itself, no, I'm not nervous. Like I'm in a very unique position to where I don't need to lie about anything.
Right.
Like a lot of people probably have to cover up stuff to, maybe not.
They might have made one wrong step, but you're saying I didn't make any wrong steps. I did everything.
Yeah.
That was correct.
Yeah. I didn't do anything wrong. But still found myself in it. And that's what really opened my eyes to how much this happens, because there's not a doubt in my mind. It's not a racial issue. It's not a black or a white issue. It's a green issue. It's a money issue. And if I hadn't had the money to go get a good attorney, there's no doubt in my mind you and me would not be having this conversation right now, and I'd be behind bars.
All right.
There's not a doubt in my mind. It all boils down to money.
Actually, I mean, we were actually talking. I was like, oh, a lot of times they'll charge you with this, and then eventually the more they'll let you worry and worry and worry, and then they'll come and they'll say, okay, let's do this. We'll let you charge to this, even though you're not guilty of anything. Mm-hmm. The fact is, a lot of people say, you know what, I'll take the manslaughter charge. Why? Because I'm just too terrified of being found guilty of murder and going away for 30 years. Mm-hmm. I'll go ahead and go for 5 years. It's already been a couple of years. So I'll go for 5. I'll get out in 4. It's fine. I don't think I did it, but I'm so scared. And they bank on that.
You're exactly 100% right. They bank on that to get their conviction rates up. And essentially, that's all public defenders are anyway. They're plea deal brokers.
Yeah.
I mean, they try to get you plea deals. They don't have and to defend them too, they don't have the resources to help you like a paid lawyer will.
Right.
So that is their best way to help you is, you're looking at 30 years. Well, I can get you a plea where you do 7 or 10 or whatever.
Right.
And that's how the prosecutors move up the ladder. I mean, that's their way to climb up the charts. Like you and I on YouTube, our way of climbing up the charts is getting good content, good guests, good episodes that spread around and people watch your show. Theirs, they want to put people in jail for life, and that's how they move up the ladder. And they don't give a shit if you're guilty or innocent. It doesn't matter.
You know, it's clickbait.
Yeah.
You know, but you think about it. Like, I know that this sounds better. It's not really what you're about to watch.
Yeah.
But I know it'll get clicks. So I know it'll get a win.
Oh, yeah.
It's not quite there. And some people will watch the whole thing hoping that that title
is in there somewhere.
But then in the end, they watch an hour and a half thing, and it's not really what happened. But by that time, I got you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so it's the same thing. Like they say, well, he answered the door with a knife and a gun. He, you know, in his hand, or he this, or the bullet trajectory doesn't line up with the story, or well, you know, all that's not true, you know. But I'm gonna say it because it'll keep the charges solid. It'll lead to maybe us going to trial, and maybe I'll get lucky and he'll take a plea, you know. So they do that, and it, you know, well, the only problem is that they're playing with people's lives, and you know,
exactly. I told my lawyer I was not taking a plea.
Yeah, and they'll justify that to them. That's what kills me about prosecutors. It's like, you're actually, like, you sleep like a baby at night. Like, you know, did I steal some money? Yeah, I stole some money. Did people get inconvenienced? Absolutely. Did people financially get harmed? Yes, there were some people that lost $5,000, $10,000. You know, did I ruin their lives? No, their lives aren't ruined. But you get in front of the judge and you say, he ruined people's lives. Like, knowing that's a lie. Know it, just to inflame the, you know, the jury or the judge and get them on their side. Like, it's, and then somebody ends up getting 20 years for, you know, for something that really probably should have gotten a couple of years. Not in my case, but I mean, say,
right,
like for drugs or something, you should have got a couple of years. You gave him 20 years. Because he pissed you off because he went to trial and didn't want to take the year or two, and you sleep like a baby at night. Like, you didn't save society. You just cost society $500,000 to incarcerate this person for 20 years, when the truth is this guy was selling, you know, dime bags, and you treated him like he was a fucking kingpin because you're pissed that he didn't take the deal.
Yeah. And that happens a lot, man, a lot more than people realize. And once this happened to me, you know, I dove into, like I said, a lot of wrongful conviction cases and stuff like that. And since then, I've been able to have a few of those guys on my show, like Russ Faria. He had a show on, I think it was Hulu. It's on Peacock now, but it was called The Truth About Pam with Renee Zellweger. And basically, his wife was dying of cancer. She was stage 4 cancer. She was literally going to be dead within a couple of months.
Right.
Like, it was the last stages. And the lady that was a friend of his wife's named Pam killed her, forged insurance documents so she could get the money, but yet they pinned the murder on Russ, and he was in jail for 3 years before the truth finally come out.
Whoa.
Yeah. Crazy. And then I just done an interview, matter of fact, it come out on my show this week with Jeffrey Deskovic. I don't know if you know who he is or not. He's been on some other shows, but he was arrested at 16 for the rape and murder of a classmate. Everything about his confession, everything was coerced, and he's done 16 years in prison before the Innocence Project got involved with him, and they found that he was not guilty, and he got out. And since then, he's actually became a lawyer to help, you know, fight these things. And he actually, when I interviewed him on my show, he actually had the first guy since he became a lawyer. His foundation had gotten people out, but since he actually went and got his law degree, this was the first guy that he got out, and he was on the show. So it happens a lot more than people think. And, you know, when you break down percentages, you're not like, oh, well, you know, something's bound to slip through the cracks. That's not something that's supposed to happen when you're talking about people's lives.
Not minor. That's not minor.
No. And I want to say the percentages are like 10 or 12% of people that are incarcerated or wrongfully incarcerated, probably higher than that because they just took a deal, like you said, because they were scared. But it's like, if I told you, oh, only 10% of planes fail, are you going to feel the same about fucking flying? Like, no. I'm not, you know, I'm even though the percentages, whatever, are very low, I was nervous as hell flying down here last night. Like, I mean, it's just, you know, anytime you have to put your trust in the hands of someone else and they have a proven track record of not being able to handle it properly, it makes you nervous.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to do with this now. I mean, you're actually the first show that I've been on that I've told the story to, and I want to tell it on other shows, but I want to get this word out there because I'm just not the guy that you think this happens to.
Yeah.
I'm not a career criminal. I've never been in trouble. I was a blue collar middle America citizen who, I don't hunt, but I love guns, and I've had guns since I was 18 years old. And
From South Carolina.
yeah, this was just something that happened, and because of short-sightedness from a detective who's actually not even a detective any longer, she got demoted all the way down to the prestigious role of security resource officer at an elementary school.
Nice. Those
So-
kids will be safe.
Yeah, maybe somebody's fruit roll.
She's probably planting stuff in their lockers right now.
I'm sure they
Get
are.
up against the wall, Sally.
Oh, and check this now. So the national championship game, which was a blowout, but we got a Buffalo Wild Wings built like right at the back of our neighborhood, and I'm there with my son, and we're watching it, and I was kind of wanting TCU to win. He was wanting Georgia to win, so he's giving me shit. And I see this woman walk in, and I was like, God, this woman looks familiar.
It was
So
her?
the guy walk in, it was her. The guy walks in, I'm just like, I know this guy too. And the more I got to looking, I'm like, holy shit, it's her. And she sits down at the table, and there's like a whole group of kids come in that say something. They had a name on the back of all their shirts, but what it is, she's like leading those kids of trying to tell them, I guess, what it takes to be an officer or whatever. I was like, I wanted so bad to stand up and be like, if y'all going to follow her, you need a different fucking line of work. Like, that's not going to work. But yeah, it was her. And she knew who I was. She kept looking. I told my son, I was like, tell me if she keeps looking back. Or he's like, oh yeah. He said she keeps looking.
You didn't turn around and go, no?
No. I started to buy her a drink though. I really did start.
that would have played nice.
Yeah.
All right, so the channel's doing all right.
It is, man. It's doing great. And like I said, I was thinking of doing like a crime-based show, true crime show, but then I was like, dude, there's so many, true crime shows, and to do it well, there's a lot of research that goes in.
Yeah.
Get facts and stuff like that. So I twisted it just a little bit, and I put that crime and entertainment on there. So when the entertainment portion kicks in, I can talk to anybody. So I've been able to talk to guys like, actors like Tom Sizemore. I had Tommy Chong on the show, which was very cool. I mean, that's probably like the one time I was just like a little starstruck. I was like, God, I watched you when I was a kid. So being able to talk to him for a couple hours. I just had a guy from The Godfather on.
Connor doesn't know who Tommy Chong is. Guarantee it. Half the people, do you?
I feel like I've heard the name before.
Listen, there's so many things that I'll be like, as we're talking, I'm thinking, he doesn't know who that is. Cheech and Chong, they used to do
weed
these,
legal in Florida? I don't know.
Yeah, they used to do all these movies. This was back when like it was taboo, and they would do these movies called like Up in Smoke, or and then they would do these movies, and they were just two kind of stoner guys. I love the ones where they think they're Mexican and they throw them in the back. They deport them to Mexico. And they're like, I'm from Detroit. Like, what are you talking about? But they're stoned. They're like, hey man, what are you talking about? Like, hey, I'm an American man. They're like, no. But they're hilarious. The movies are hilarious. Probably funnier if you're stoned.
Yeah, for sure. But I don't know, even funnier as a kid when I was watching them, because like I don't know if I necessarily knew what they were doing as a kid the first time I watched it. I didn't understand it. They were high. But it was just funny because like the car's like filled with smoke, and he's like, hey, how's my driving? And he's like, I think we're parked, man. And they're like on the side of the road in front of a sign. And the cop comes up. He's like, where's your license? Back there on the bumper, man. I mean, but having him on there was just really, really cool. Been able to talk to, like as the actors from The Sopranos. That's like my favorite TV show.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got to talk with like 4 or 5 people from Sopranos.
God, he fucking killed himself, right? Like the guy who plays Tony Soprano.
No, he didn't kill himself. He's died. Heart attack.
Oh, he just had a heart attack?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he killed himself. I don't know why.
Talking about
he
James
died.
Gandolfini.
Yeah.
No, he had a heart attack
I
in
thought
Italy.
he killed himself.
No. He's been dead a couple of years now, but he just had a heart attack in Italy. I mean, if you watch that show in progression, you could tell he did get bigger each season.
Yeah.
And I think it was just one of the things where he never kind of got it under control, and he got a little bit bigger. And yeah, he had a heart attack in Italy. I'm pretty sure it was Italy. And his son was over there with him, I believe. But then, they redone, they called it Many Saints of Newark. And his son, Michael, plays a younger him in the movie. So it's like everybody from Sopranos, but maybe in their 20s or something like that. And, that was the basis of that movie. So you get all the same characters in there, but they're obviously just different people. But I thought that was kind of cool that he played his dad.
Yeah.
But yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, it's been going very well. I had guests like you on there. A lot of Tim McBride, who I know you've interviewed.
Tim
Fucking
McBride
great.
and can go forever.
Yes,
He'll go and go and go, and it's like, yeah, listen, Tim, like I appreciate this, but
Yeah, we were at like 2 hours 45 minutes, and he was just still going. I was like,
and then all of a sudden he says, and at this point, I started selling marijuana. Tim, what are you doing, bro? And that's when we started smuggling. Oh God, the smuggling story is another 4 hours.
I don't like to keep people longer than an hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, because some people don't even like sitting for longer than an hour. But there's some stories that just have to go, and I think one of the only other ones.
He's made a whole. Tim don't have a job.
Yeah.
He got a whole career based on just, I'll show up and I'll tell you my story. And he tells it the same pretty much every time. Mm-hmm. He hits the points. He's got the, he's and he gets paid for speaking engagements for, yeah, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. Who else is like that? Oh, Mike Dowd.
Yes.
Have you talked to Mike Dowd?
I've met Mike in New York. We went up there for Anthony Ruggiano was having something at a studio in Long Island, and I met him, and we were actually supposed to do a show the weekend that my charges got dropped. I had the flu. I was diagnosed with the flu. I was supposed to go back up there that weekend, and me and Dowd were supposed to do a show in that same studio, but I had to cancel it. So we're gonna get it done at some point. But I met him personally.
He's got the second highest views on my channel. He was I think he was the first interview I did, and the video itself, like Colby botched. Like there are times where like 20 minutes in, and then maybe another an hour in, then like an hour and 10 minutes in, where I'm doing this. And it's Dowd is talking, and I'm not talking, or Dowd is talking, and it's saying something else. Like it's like he totally Colby just botched the whole thing. Still got, because it was the first time we were doing it.
Yeah.
And what we were doing was we had 2 cameras, but we didn't have the switcher yet. So he was there, and he took it, and when he stacked the videos, something happened. Oh, plus the cameras we had were like shutting off. Oh, boy. I mean, it was a fucking train wreck, bro. Yeah. Right? Because I had the old cameras that shut off at like 25 minutes or 22 minutes. Now we got these. I got these things, and they don't. Actually, this one overheats sometimes, but for the most part, they're great. But still, he was great. He was great, and I didn't even know his whole story.
Wow.
Because I knew parts of the story. And then later I was like, I should have watched the whole thing, because he missed. He always skips the part where he was supposed to kidnap this person.
Yeah.
Like he skips that whole part. And then he's like, yeah. And then I went to jail. If I had known better, I'd be like, wait a second. You skipped the fucking kidnapping. We don't have to talk about that. But he's a character. It's funny too, because I've always been like, is he coked up? Like he's so animated, but
he's just wired, man.
Everybody says that.
Is.
That's just how he is, bro. He's just jacked up all the time.
Well, you can imagine when he was doing it.
Oh God!
Like he said, I don't know. Have you watched the whole documentary since then?
Since then, yes. But
so he said he just like pulls in his Corvette in the damn Chiefs parking spot. I mean, like,
yeah, he's
I
a
can
maniac.
see him doing that.
He's a maniac. You know what's so funny is you'll talk to, like, I have a cousin who's a meth addict, right? And there are some people, like if I drink coffee, like I can't go to bed. Like I can go upstairs. If I drink a cup of coffee, I can't go upstairs and go to sleep. But because my cousin's like a meth addict, and he's just wired different. He'll drink 2 cups of coffee and it puts him to sleep. Wow. And it's like, what? And a lot of these guys are like this. So I was wondering, like, if this is Dowd normal, what's he like on coke? He may be like drowsy, like falling asleep and totally like calm, like you're talking to an accountant or something, instead of this maniac. But yeah, I've had some great ones. Listen, you know what another podcast I had was a guy named Walt Pavlo. You weren't here yet with Walt. This was at the old house, at the old place, the old house. I'm gonna say the studio. It was really my apartment. So at the old studio. And Walt, we had a conversation, and I knew a little bit about Walt's. Like he was a part of MCI. He worked for MCI, And I thought, okay, so you fudged some numbers. No big deal. And, it's like I had heard bits and pieces of the story, but it was such a boring story. I never followed. I never really watched the whole thing, right?
Right.
Then he came and he told the story. And as the story progressed, I was like, you did what? Like, he's working deals with people that owe money. Like, give me $1 million. I'll get your credit line turned back on. You can borrow this much. You can then run it up to this much money. Close it down. Send me the $1 million offshore. He's got like 6 or 7 million stacked offshore. Like, he's running a whole scam on MCI while they're melting down. He's taking, and I was like, listen, in the middle of that thing, I remember looking at him going, bro, I have like, this is horrible, but I have like a newfound respect for you. Like, I thought he was just like some CPA, like cooking the books.
Yeah.
No, bro, you're running this massive, he didn't steal a little bit of money. It's millions and millions. Offshore, hidden accounts. It was like, this is brilliant. Like, it was horrible. I mean, I feel bad. I feel bad. But, it was.
Tommy, Tommy got locked up. Speaking of Tommy Chong, he got locked up for a little while when he had his bond company, and it was when Biden and Obama was in administration. There was something that they were trying to get him on of selling paraphernalia across state lines or something along those lines. I forgot the specifics, but basically he copped to the charge. We got like 6 months in prison if they would leave his family alone, because they basically said they wanted him. He was the name. And when he went in there, whatever prison, it wasn't a prison. It was more of a
like a camp.
Thing.
It was a camp.
Yeah. Well, he was in there with Jordan Belfort.
Yeah. Belfort says he convinced me to write my story.
Yeah. And that's what he told him. He's like, he said, I believe in something called the most of. And he said, Jordan was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, man, whatever it is. He's like, it's the most of. He's like, if you were high, you're the most high you've ever been in your fucking life. If you were going fast, that was the fastest you've ever drove in your life. And then I'm just like, I'm remembering bits and pieces of the Wolf of Wall Street. And I'm like, well, he took that to the letter, because everything in there was the most of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. He said they couldn't hang around each other because they're both like convicted felons. But he said he would stop at the street and he would step out and they would like yell at each other from the porch.
Well, all right. I mean, we're good. You feel got anything else? No?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing is, people, when you see something on TV, if you see, because I'll even admit I was like this. When you see something, they made an arrest, I was like, well, damn, he must have did it.
Yeah.
It was just how I was, my mode of thinking at the time. Now,
no,
not so much.
No, listen, what about Law and Order? Like, I used to watch Law and Order, and like there were times when McCoy was the district attorney. So McCoy, you don't know what Law and Order, you've heard of it? Unbelievable. Well, longest running fucking program ever. So anyway, like multiple series, spinoffs, everything. Anyway, McCoy would find out in the middle of something of the investigation, and he'd charge this guy. In the middle of it, something would happen, and he would go, "Oh my God, like he's not guilty." And then they would be like, "Quick, where is he?" Well, he's in Rikers right now. Call the warden. We got to get him out. Like he's a fit. Like, oh my God, I sent the wrong man to jail. We have to get this. Listen, in real life, they go, shh. Don't say anything, bro. We got a conviction. He's in jail. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, we're good.
Let it
like,
go.
Yeah, that like it's fine. It's fine. He had his day in court. It says he's guilty. Yeah, but now. I don't know anything. That could mean anything. I don't know. Like, suddenly it's like, are you fucking serious? The guy's innocent. In the movies, they're offended because prosecutors want to do the right thing, right? But in real, I mean that's in the movies, but in real life, a lot of times they want a conviction. Like, I don't really think this guy probably murdered him. He maybe it's manslaughter, but I think I can get him for murder. Okay, well wait a second. Like, you just said, well, yeah, but if I twist it this way and do this, and I think I can get that guy down the street to say this. I think he'll say that if I push him. I think I can convince the jury. It's like, what are you doing? There's nothing here. There's not even this. Or they overreach. Casey Anthony, murder. Okay, but you can't prove murder. Why don't you leave manslaughter on the table? No, we'll pull it. and will force them to convict her of murder because they have to charge her with something.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? They don't charge her. They say, nah, I don't see murder. Maybe manslaughter. We're not going to charge her. But there's no manslaughter. They took it off the table. So so is she guilty? No, not of murder. Boom, she goes free.
Yep.
So, people don't realize the games they play, and sometimes it works to their advantage, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes guilty people go free, and sometimes innocent people end up getting fucking 25 or 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, in researching this, I found out it happens a lot. And like I said, a lot of it, like we mentioned earlier, boils down to who you can have as a lawyer. And even sometimes a good lawyer can help. I mean, Casey Anthony's lawyer, at least, I don't know how well he was known at the time. I know he's big shit now.
But he was amazing. And then he got off, what was the football player?
Hernandez.
Hernandez. I mean, Hernandez killed himself because of the second case or whatever that may have happened.
The other one, he got him off on, the second one.
Never got him off on that case. Like, it was insane. It's like, wow, this guy... Even Casey Anthony's, the fact that he got her off was insane.
Yeah, that was insane. Matter of fact, his name got brought up when somebody was saying, when we were talking about
Jose Baez.
Yeah, Jose Baez. Is it Baez? Baez?
Oh, Baez?
It might be Baez. I can't remember.
Jose something Spanish.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, shit. I was like, yeah, I'll stick to local guys, you know. But
plus,
I mean...
plus you had, not that it couldn't have gone bad, but honestly... You had a solid and probably, which is probably a mistake on your part, is you're like, I'm innocent, which may or may not have meant anything.
Yeah.
But the fact is that, so one, you had, hey, one, I'm innocent, and two, you're thinking like, this should be a slam. If I do go to trial, like, it could go either way, but it's like, I know I haven't done anything.
Well, what we were thinking of, or what we were going to make a motion for, is what was called a Duncan hearing. And that's basically a plea of self-defense and castle law. Now, that wouldn't be the trial. That would be us. So at that point in time, we have the burden of proof on us to prove that we acted in self-defense. If they would say, okay, well, no, we don't see self-defense, denied or whatever, then we would have to go to trial. Then the burden of proof gets flipped to the state to prove that I done this or whatever. And I'm just like... Even from the start, from the first piece of the conversation, like, I don't reach out to that guy. He reached out to me.
Yeah.
Like, murder is premeditated murder. Like, at no point in that time did I have time to think or plan any of this. I was at home in bed watching the UFC. I mean, so all of it was there. They took my phone. They took his phones. All of it was there. So they had it all. They knew it. I think it was, my opinion, at the end of the day, a rookie cop rushed to, or not rookie, I shouldn't say rookie, but newly promoted to detective, rushed to judgment. And in doing so, it cost me, probably up by the time it was all said and done, because I had to pay for that forensics guy to come down. We had to pay, he flew down twice. It's probably going to be close to like $100,000 that I've been out of just to prove that I'm innocent, and all for them to just drop the charges. We didn't even have to do the Duncan hearing. They just dropped it. And to me, that's basically saying, my bad, we fucked up.
I just wonder how many elementary children right now are having drugs planted in their lockers from this woman.
The incarceration rate in the local juvenile facilities is going to be going through the roof here.
Skyrocketed. All right. We're good?
Yes, sir. We're good, man. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you flying down. I appreciate you coming and doing it in person. And
that's what I want to do. And I want to get on a few more shows and just spread the word about this, because we mentioned earlier, this you wouldn't expect a guy like me to be involved in something like this. You would think it was clear cut. Anybody that I ever told the story to was, well, that's self-defense. Yeah, most sane people think that, but I guess some people didn't. Yeah. But, it does depend a lot on the lawyer. And there's insurances that protect you from certain things like that. I need to get up with them. I need to be their spokesperson. I need to be like, dude, you let me go at a seminar, you're trying to sell this insurance, I'll tell them how much money they can save, because it happened.
Yeah.
And basically it's like, if you pay, I think it's like, we'll just say $20 or whatever, you get like $50,000 worth of coverage. And if you're found not guilty, then you get, everything's paid for. It's like Carry Guard or USAA, but it protects you in these situations. Yeah. So if you use your weapon and then you get charged, they cover all the expenses.
Kind of like I do for the home title lock.
Yeah.
It's like a little spokesperson. Hey, if you like the video, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Share the video to all your friends and family. Also, do me a favor and leave me a comment. Like the video. Leave me a comment in the comment section, because I kind of botched that, but that's fine. Leave me a comment in the comment section. I will respond to, I'm going to go with 80 to 90% of the comments. Some of them are just there's just no reason to respond. Also, you can, if you like the video, you can thank. Oh, sorry, I think I spit on you. Thank me. You can thank me by hitting the thank you button, and it allows you to donate like $1.99 or $4.99, whatever. Those are awesome. I appreciate that. I also have Patreon. This is the whole pitch. So I also have Patreon. Also, in the description, we're going to leave the link for Chip's YouTube channel, Crime and Entertainment. And also, if you like true crime, I've got like 6 or 7 books. The links will also be in the description box. And yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you very much. And see you.